It is December 15th, 2023 at 1 p.m. I am Lundy, the chair of the Natural Medicine Advisory Board, and my pronouns are they, them. Just as a reminder, you're welcome to refer to me as Chair, Chair Lundy, Chairperson, but please refrain from gendering my salutations. I am declaring that we do have a quorum present for our meeting today. I'm also declaring that I have a headache. So if I get clunky with my script or a little slow at times, that is why. Please have a little grace with me today. The purpose of this meeting is to act on important business related to the Colorado Natural Medicine Health Act. The board will make its decisions on agenda items today based upon written materials provided for its consideration in advance of this meeting. The public is welcome to listen in and observe the workings of the board. This is not a stakeholder engagement forum, and the public should not address the board unless requested by the board. Attendees will be muted to ensure the board is able to efficiently conduct its business as is set forth on the agenda. When the board moves into executive session, the public will be notified and the board will convene privately. After the executive session, the board will return to this open meeting to discuss and vote, if necessary, on agenda items discussed in the executive session. Thank you for attending today's meeting and for your interest in these important matters. A few housekeeping items as we get started. I would like to ask everyone to turn their cell phones to silent. If you have to leave the meeting at any point, please let us know by raising your hand so we can reflect that in the minutes, and the same goes for when you return. Please do not use the chat function if it's enabled for you on Zoom. Please also make sure your name reflects your pronouns. If you click on your video screen on those three little dots, you can click what says rename and enter your pronouns. If you're having difficulty with renaming your Zoom, contact Lori Bratton, the program director. And before we enter roll call in our agenda items, I wanted to first acknowledge the massive amounts of grief within our world. Over 20,000 people, mostly women and children, have been killed in Gaza since October. The Russia-Ukrainian war continues, as well as the war in Sudan. And I'm aware that some board members provide support to refugees, survivors, military personnel through their work. And all of us are impacted by devastations to humanity. As well, while the holiday season is a time of immense warmth and love within families, it's also a time of grief for those without family or those of us who are rejected by their families. During such times, I'm reminded of the transformative nature of our work here together, of the therapeutic and ceremonial and healing spaces. Thank you, board members, for showing up with your diverse perspectives to advise thoughtfully for safe and inclusive access to natural medicine therapy. It's truly an honor to do this work with you and weave together the cloth that will form the regulated industry in Colorado. With that being said, let's start roll call. Lundy, I'm present. Vice Chair, Dr. Bradley Condor.
Present.
Dr. Tina Gonzalez.
Present.
Dr. Clarissa Pincola Estes Reyes. Is Dr. with us?
No. Yes.
Yeah. Just heard you. Thanks.
Good time.
Thank you. Commissioner Wendy Paxton Andrade.
I am here, and can I do my attestation because I have a board meeting I have to leave at 25 after.
Absolutely. Should we wait till the end of roll call or go ahead and do the attestation?
They told me to do it now when I get roll call, just to have it out of the way.
Great, you got it. You test and affirm that all board members have been disclosed. I'm not exactly at that script, but I believe
I attest.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
We appreciate you joining us for however long you can. Dr. Sophia Chavez.
Present. And I wanted to share that
I've never had sciatic issues, and I have all these meetings that I'm sitting for. So there will be times when I'm going to be turning my camera on. I apologize for that when I stand up, but I'll turn it back on when I'm sitting. Thank you.
You bet. You bet. Take care of yourself. I'm currently at a stand time. You may see me sit down at some point. So, heard. Skippy, up to Israel.
I am present, and Dr. Chavez, after the call, if you get hold of me, we have a board member who has a beautiful 7-minute practice you can do in your seat that's designed specifically for being between board meetings.
Ricardo Baca.
Afternoon, everyone present, and I should probably also do my attest, Lundy as well. I will be here for the first hour of today's meeting.
Okay. Ricardo, do you attest and affirm that all board matters have been kept confidential?
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sheriff David Lucero.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm present, and I too have to run at 2 o'clock, so I should probably do my attestation as well.
Okay. Do you attest and affirm that all board matters have been held confidential since our last meeting?
I do.
Thank you. Will Dunn. I see he may be absent. Is Will here?
I believe he's absent.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Joshua Goodwin.
I'm present, and I'll be here the whole meeting.
Fantastic, me too. Dr. Alyssa Hannum.
Present, pronouns are she, her. Hope your headache gets going better too, Lundy. It's that time of year. The barometer's changing.
Oh, yes, it's so true. I think that's actually exactly it. Thank you. Dr. Sue Sicily.
I'm present, and I just wanted to thank you, Chair, for that intro earlier and for setting the right tone for all of this. Appreciate it.
You bet. Thank you. Billy Wynn.
Present. Pronouns are you have. Okay.
Stacy Lokes.
She's done it, and she should be on soon.
Okay. Dominique Mendiola, our DOR representative.
I'm present, and my pronouns are she, her. Thank you.
Thank you, Dominique. Now I would like to hand it over to Lori Bratton, our incredible program director, to do her introductions.
Thank you, Chair, for that. I'm Lori Bratton, the program director. Today we have Sam Barami, the senior advisor for the natural medicine program. We have Monica Sutherland, who is a policy analyst, who is filling in for Amanda today. She's running our webinar, so thank you very much, Monica. We also have Kathy Duran. She is here helping with some of the paperwork in the background. Thank you, Kathy. And we have Jackie Arpson. Jackie, you're going to have to say our title again. It's very long.
Lori, the Deputy Director of Program Operations. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And let's see, did I miss anyone? Nope. Back to you, Chair.
Shall we have the AG's office introduce themselves?
Yes.
Thank you, Lindy. I'm Ashley Moeller. I'm the first Assistant Attorney General from the AG's office. My team and I represent the advisory board and DORA. Today, you will see both Ashley Carter and Brian Urankar, who serve with me as GCs, and we have also brought special guest Leo, our fellow for the year, who has done some research on your behalf. They'll all be available during executive session.
Thank you so much. Welcome, Leo. Okay, let's move on to reviewing the meeting minutes briefly together, and then I ask for a board member to move to approve if there is no discussion.
I would move to approve and designate Lori as the signer.
I will second that. This is Commissioner Buxton Andrade.
Thank you both. Super efficient, and thanks for including that. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion passes. Now let's move on to agenda item number 1. I'm going to pass it back to Lori, our program director, for the program director's update.
Thank you, Chair. I think in a previous meeting, if it wasn't in the subcommittees, it was a full board, that I was reminding everyone to please complete their cybersecurity training, because everyone should have been emailed asking for that training to be completed by the end of the year. They have extended that into March, so no need to rush and worry about it. Thank you if you've already done it. I appreciate that. And a reminder that if you have any conflicts with meeting times, or please let me know in advance so that I can ensure that we have a quorum at the meetings. That's it.
Yes, Dr. Gunham.
Lori, would it be possible to get staff to let us know if we haven't completed the training? I kind of remember doing it. I know that sounds crazy, but it's been a wild ride this month.
Absolutely. I'll be happy to send that list out again.
Third. Skippy.
Just a procedural question. Lori, am I correct in remembering that today is the last time that the Natural Medicine Board as a whole body will review the consolidated recommendations before the initial tranche of recommendations go out to the state legislature to start being promulgated, or is that incorrect?
No, there's still time to do the work. Everything is basically compiled, but there are gaps that still need to be addressed, and we will be talking.
Got it. So we'll have another meeting before that. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I just want to add and clarify that my ask was that subcommittees talk through the questions that they knew were remaining in December. I'm also aware that some subcommittees have not yet met for December. So January, Skippy, is where we're going to be looking more fully, and we have more time to be iterative in the process in the coming months.
I appreciate that. And just, if I can, just because I have a good amount of legislative experience for like the rest of us that are on the board that don't, I have observed, I'm not saying any of you are going to do this, there's like a tendency to kind of want to sit in the back of class, not say anything, not want to be the person that's like, oh, I've got all these little thoughts, they're not that important, right? And so you just don't raise things that seem small, or you don't want to be annoying. But it's actually really, really important and critical. And it's especially important this month before these initial rounds get out. Yes, it's true. You can always go back. You can amend the Constitution of the United States of America. And the reality, for a lot of different reasons, both formal and informal, is it just gets more harder and less likely. So I just really want to invite everyone to like take up all your space, take the time to read the details, and really dig in and feel super proud of what goes out individually. Even if that means longer meetings for the next month, it will ultimately mean a much healthier psychedelic ecosystem for Colorado and really by proxy the rest of the US. So just want to open that door of permission for everybody.
Thank you, Skippy. I appreciate you setting that tone. I agree. Also, as an introvert, I invite all of us that may be thinkers and quieter to consider speaking in particular. All right. With that being said, Lori, is there anything left in your update?
Nope, that's it. Thank you, Chair.
You bet. Skippy, just so you know, I still see your hand up. All right. The second agenda item is the Attorney General update. Ms. Stoller, I'd like to turn it over to you.
Thank you. As you know, we've got an executive session notice for later in this meeting.
Oh, I think your camera and audio just went out, Ashley.
And can you see me?
Oh, you're back. I can see you. I think that you are still, okay. I think you're back.
Am I back?
I hear you now.
Perfect. Sorry, I'm now getting an internet connection as unstable message. So, because we all have our challenges today, please bear with me and let me know if I freeze. We have an executive session set for today to address a couple of questions that have come up in subcommittees. We thought it would be valuable for everyone to hear the advice, so we will be addressing that later today. I also want to throw out there that this is an ongoing process, and as additional questions come up, by all means, we can schedule executive sessions for legal advice in subsequent meetings. So this is not the only time. So if you do have questions, use your voice, speak up and forward them on so that we can perform appropriate research for you so that we can actually give you the tools and the resources that you need to do your work. So that's number one. Number two, I do want to put it out there that the recommendations that are getting developed that you all are working very diligently on in your subcommittees and reviewing as a full board are going to get referred to DORA and to the Department of Revenue so that they can make they can use your subject matter expertise and develop rules that will get adopted by those two entities. And so this first, I want to be clear that the work that you are doing is first going to make it to the executive agencies that will adopt rules. And so I don't anticipate that the first stage is going to have any legislative change. It's not going to go to the General Assembly for this session, I don't think. I think this is directed toward both DORA and the Department of Revenue to start adopting those rules that will then help to govern this program. It is an iterative process in a lot of respects. So you will start a rulemaking with your building blocks for your program and the basics, and then they may adopt rules in serial stages, right? So if something is still being chewed on and worked on, it will not be for naught. You can certainly make recommendations on an ongoing basis. So I just want to make sure that everyone is clear about that. And with that, I will cede the floor.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you providing that clarity for us. Okay, we're going to move on to the next agenda item. Briefly, I did want to let all of you know I am thoughtful to breaks. So we will take a break between 60 to 90 minutes. My best attempts at trying to do it when there's a natural pause. So for those of you who appreciate that, I just wanted to let you know that is on my mind. And with that being said, let's move on to agenda item number 3 and hear from our friends at DOR. Dominique, I will pass it to you, and Allison Robinette to provide your updates.
Thank you very much, Chair. It's wonderful to see everyone this afternoon. Again, my name is Dominique Mendiola, and I serve as the Senior Director for the Colorado Department of Revenue's Natural Medicine Division, and I'm joined by my colleague, Director of Policy and Regulatory Affairs, Allison Robinette. So I'm going to kick us off by just reviewing what we have accomplished collectively here from the Department of Revenue's perspective in 2023. And we touched on some of this work in the last full board meeting, but as we approach the new year and with much work ahead in 2024, we felt it important to revisit some of what we have accomplished this year. We also want to express our deep appreciation for the collaboration and engagement with our partners at DORA, among other agencies, as well as the advisory board and other stakeholders that have inspired and helped inform these initiatives. We first held, and again, these are areas that we did briefly touch on in some areas on the in our last full board meeting. So we've held regional town halls in Grand Junction and Durango. And this also included opportunities for us to engage with the Southern Ute and Ute Mountain Ute tribal members to enhance awareness about the work that we are doing here. We began initial engagement as well with various law enforcement agencies at the state and local levels to create awareness about the changes in the law and to inform our ongoing work related to first responder training specifically. We've also held 8 listening sessions since the beginning of September. One meeting covered an overview of changes in the law adopted in Proposition 122 and Senate Bill 290. We held 2 meetings that covered public education. 2 meetings covered cultivation and manufacturing practices. We've had 2 meetings that touched on first responder training and 1 meeting on our testing program considerations. Also want to touch on some quick hits from those September and October sessions. At the last board meeting, we gave a quick summary of our takeaways from those meetings that we held, those listening sessions that we held between September and October. And rather than really get into the detail of those, because we did provide some updates, some summary updates, since then, we have developed those written summaries of those sessions. And so we want to make sure that you all are aware that those materials that summarize what we have taken away from those listening sessions between September and October are available on our website at this point. We also are going to look to touch on is really more new material, what we've covered from our November through December session. So I'm going to kick it over to Allison to kick us off there. Thank you.
Thank you, Dominique, and good afternoon, board. So as Dominique mentioned, we've held 3 sessions in the past 3 weeks to dig deeper into first responder training, public education and data collection, and cultivation and manufacturing practices. And so we wanted to share some highlights from sort of those deepening conversations that we're having with stakeholders. So starting with first responder, public responders. And how we provide resources about the difference of just the community of first responders, but also for other folks who are engaged in natural medicine services, whether that's at a healing center or participants. We also heard from stakeholders that if the facilitator is calling a first responder, they recognize that it's something they need to have assistance with that goes beyond the challenging experience. And so how can we support first responders to recognize appropriately? In addition to just sitting in that experience. So again, this is all focused on how can we be equipping our first responders with materials so that they're prepared to respond to these situations as needed. Another area that we heard from stakeholders is about withdrawal reactions, because there may be a perceived gap in the community, especially when it comes to emergency services, and sometimes a focus on identifying impairment, which may not always be the case. It's a lot, there seems to be a potential here for people who are eager to participate and thinking they want to weigh off other medications so that they're in a position to engage national medicine services. But what does that withdrawal medication look like? And how are we ensuring that they're safely doing that? And on this last point, there was a focus in this discussion about helping first responders understand and identify adverse events stemming from drug-to-drug interactions. Lundy, Chair, did you have okay. And the last point I'll highlight here is attendees in our listening session also highlighted numerous other resources that are available through third-party platforms, and many of which we've heard about in these sub-meetings as well. So it's nice to see overlapping information. It's starting to feel like we're getting our arms around this good information available.
Thanks, Allison. And so I'm going to jump into just what we've taken from our more recent data collection listening sessions, our second one on data collection. And first, leading up to this second session on data collection, we began coordinating with our partner state agencies to understand what data is currently available in this space. Examples include relevant data available through the Colorado Crime Statistics dashboard, that is produced by the Colorado Bureau of Investigation. This could directly apply to our mandates around data reporting on law enforcement incident. So we saw that as an important flag for us here. Similarly, we noted that the Attorney General's office has an established system for collecting consumer protection claims data, which is also relevant to the statutory directives of Senate Bill 290. And as we continue, there's more information we've identified that around data that is available that could be directly relevant to this work that we are expected to do based on what's required under Senate Bill 290. So as we continue to compile this information, we look forward to presenting what we pulled together more comprehensively in the next full board meeting. During the listening session, we heard a presentation from Dr. Andrew Monte with the Rocky Mountain Poison and Drug Safety Center, and from Dr. Scott Thompson at CU Anschutz about data collection approaches that they were recommending or suggesting. In this session, attendees had focused on areas of data collection and what should be mandatory and what should be voluntary, both for licensees and for participants. Some stakeholders have noted that some baseline data is really necessary and appropriate to require licensees to collect and report, while others suggested only an opt-in is appropriate for collecting participant data. Additionally, stakeholders had suggested value in understanding at least how many people access or are accessing natural medicine services and from where. So data really on the number of people who are accessing regulated natural medicine compared to data associated with personal use, so that we're making an appropriate distinction and taking some of those lessons learned that we have had in cannabis around not having at the initial stages really strong baseline data that we have made significant progress on, but wanting to see where we can really at the starting point look to that experience and to inform where we begin here in this space. We also felt it was really important for us to clarify the statutory mandate regarding data collection, specifically that our department is required to, and in coordination with our partners at DORA, are required to collect and report available data, which we don't interpret as requiring participants to provide certain data. We acknowledge as well sensitivities around this and how data mandates imposed, particularly on participants or even licensees, to some extent can discourage participation in the regulatory program and create other unintended consequences or risks, legal, social, or occupational risks. We also heard about and agree with the importance of prioritizing measures to prevent or otherwise mitigate issues like data breach risks. We, in that same session, included a portion and discussion around public education, and this was the second time we touched on this. And so in this listening session, when we touched on public education, we had recapped what we heard in the prior session, and we really appreciated how this work that we did to document our takeaways and present a recap of that in the subsequent listening session prompted additional stakeholder feedback to clarify and ensure that we were really accurately capturing those takeaways. So we're going to build on that.
And I'll jump in here to give a quick recap of the session we held just this past Monday, which was focused on cultivation and manufacturing practices. So this was the second time we were digging deeper into what kind of practices we should be expecting and how we should approach that in regulatory framework. And in our session on Monday, we had a wonderful presentation from our partners at the Department of Public Health and Environment's Small Business Assistance Program, which focused on recommendations for best practices in safe cultivation and manufacturing, and really touching on some of those environmental and sustainability practices that we may want to keep at the forefront of our regulatory framework from the outset. During the discussion on this topic, stakeholders helped us drill down on two potential sort of thought pathways or approaches with considering cultivation and manufacturing. The first is if we limit licensees' ability to use certain substrates, chemicals, or processes, then we may also limit the need for robust finished product testing because the introduction of potential contaminants is minimized. However, on the other hand, limiting what someone can do in their cultivation or manufacturing facility may have negative impacts on the practices they want to use and create additional cost and environmental impacts. For example, We heard that regulations prohibiting the use of manure as a substrate raised concerns about the expensive alternatives like cocoa coir and how alternative substrates are sourced with, there were suggestions that sources may involve mining that could lead to unintended environmental impacts. So how are we balancing these considerations as we, further dig into the regulatory rulemaking process? And then also the other side of this, if we look at a broader scope of allowances at cultivation and manufacturing level, then is it appropriate to require more testing, which will carry a cost with it? Considering the cost of compliance, we appreciate to the extent the board can include details regarding the cost they would see associated with specific recommendations they're crafting. This is something we are encouraging our listening session attendees to also share more detail around so that we are fully informed in making any regulatory decision. Stakeholders also provided feedback on occupational health and safety concerns, for example, mushroom workers' lung, and the necessity for minimum protections, for example, requiring air filtration in cultivation facilities. During this session, we also covered discussion about defined terms and the need to be clear in our regulations. For example, when it comes to how we're defining batch when establishing inventory tracking requirements. Given that within this space, there are already a number of cultivators who use different practices and are likely to use different terms to mean similar steps, processes, or materials. And so that's going to be, a priority of stakeholder engagement in the rulemaking process is making sure that terminology we use in the regulations is commonly accepted and easily understood. And lastly, we had a good discussion regarding product types that we can expect to see in this space, which includes, of course, whole dried mushrooms and powderized mushrooms. But we also heard about new product types that could be developed and introduced with the potential ability, for example, of being skull-sided. These are areas we'll want to examine further and understand the board's position on, specifically the risks associated with some of the more novel products and the extent to which categories in the first year of implementation may be prohibited. So even if it's in the context of prohibiting certain product types in the first year of implementation, while we continue to examine and understand safety profiles of different products. And then we did dive into discussions regarding methods of administration, which should be permitted. And we heard specific feedback from stakeholders that the division should be cognizant and consider people who may not be able to swallow or otherwise consume in a traditional method, but still want to access and participate in natural medicine services. So I see this as particularly relevant to a number of different subcommittees discussions, particularly product research data and public health.
Thanks, Allison. And as we look ahead to 2024, we anticipate holding additional listening sessions before we move into that formal rulemaking process. And just keeping in mind, as we've shared before, and as we have reinforced in the listening sessions that we have hosted, is as we approach the rulemaking process, we really are we're seeing a need to prioritize our focus on what are those implementation mandates. Where are in sections of the law are we being directed to do rulemaking in very specific areas? That is going to really drive where we focus our upcoming listening sessions that we'll look to announce in the new year, as well as where we're going to focus our rulemaking when we're prepared to initiate that formal process. We'll be looking to evolve the structure of these sessions, which may include presenting initial regulatory language for stakeholder feedback. And also because the personal use provisions of the law are already in effect, and considering our deep dives into both Proposition 122 and Senate Bill 290, we think it's really important for us to start with materials that focus on creating general awareness around what the law allows and restricts around personal use. We are developing a Know the Law resource as a base educational resource, which we want to be sure we're making available in different formats and languages, which we plan to launch in the new year, and will also inform our additional educational initiatives. We also see potential for other work like surveys, other regional outreach with various stakeholder groups, and focus groups. Consistent with our practice, we intend for any of these activities to be recorded or otherwise documented and made public to support our broad engagement and transparency in the work that we're doing. As it relates to the recommendations that the board is developing and that we've appreciated having insights around, We have done an initial review of the recommendations as they currently stand. And while we are prepared to provide more detailed feedback in writing, we wanted to use this opportunity to highlight some big picture considerations for each of these subcommittees that are developing recommendations, which we expect to be directed to the Department of Revenue's Natural Medicine Division. And to be clear, what we are sharing today is not comprehensive, but rather an initial touch on items that we thought would be good to flag for today's board meeting. Now listen.
So I will kick us off here, looking at the Products Research and Data Subcommittee recommendations as they stand in for the most recent version that the board is looking at. And so starting more high level, wanted to share that it would be helpful for the committee to consider including the board's intent behind recommendations, or generally speaking overall, which will assist the department in determining, based on additional information and feedback from stakeholders, whether certain adjustments need to be made in the rulemaking process that will still accomplish the board's objectives. So what I mean when I'm flagging this is really, for example, just understanding the objective. So if overall objectives either on the recommendations are addressing public health and safety risks, that will help us understand the why behind each of the recommendations. An example could be if the purpose of a specific recommendation is to minimize testing cost impacts, then how do we create the balance between cost and political objectives? Having sort of that insight into the board's why and reason behind the specific recommendation will just help us ensure that we are, all aligned and that we are taking our best efforts to implement the recommendation as intended. We also wanted to recognize that testing requirements will largely be dependent, as we've heard in our listening sessions, on what processes and practices are permitted or prohibited in cultivation and manufacturing facilities. And as we've noted, we've heard different perspectives from stakeholders in our listening sessions regarding testing specifically tied to this idea about permissions and prohibitions. And one example is, for example, certain substrates. If manure is permitted, then more robust testing may need to take place on a regular basis. However, if on the other hand, a process like a chemical or some other ingredient is prohibited, then maybe testing that does not need to be as robust and frequent. So those are things that we are currently weighing and are prepared to engage with the Products Research and Data Subcommittee to help inform just how we can balance these different considerations. And we've also heard stakeholders' perspectives on the pros and cons or against approach to testing. So I think that's helpful informative for all of our purposes as we approach these conversations.
Thanks, Allison. And then shifting over to the work of the Emergency Response Safety and Ethics Committee, with regard to this committee's recommendations developed so far and specific to facilities and safety requirements, we want to ensure that we have a shared understanding with the board regarding necessary, potential necessary adjustments that, we see may be needed for purposes of Colorado's program. And we recognize the board has adjusted some language in their recommendations, which are drawn from Oregon's rules in certain areas. And so we just wanted to flag that, as we look to the board's recommendations and where they may be informed by what Oregon has developed, is where we may see opportunities or needs to further revise the language to align those the terminology to our laws here in Colorado. Some examples of that refer to, and that may or may not apply, but wanted just to mention here is, the reference to authorized personnel and how that may inform potential adjustments if we lead into identified need of establishing occupational, like employee type licensing, and what terminology we're using for that purpose, or the reference to administration area, which may be appropriate here, but are we properly defining that to ensure it's applying to Colorado's program? And so rulemaking may require adjustments to language, but we want to make sure that we're doing that in a way that isn't deviating from the board's recommendations if we see that we're looking to move in that direction. We also want to make sure that we understand which recommendations are directed specifically to the Department of Revenue compared to those that could apply to both the Department of Revenue and DORA. For example, recommendations that may create overlapping responsibilities for both facilitators and healing centers. We did want to flag, as this can also be relevant to other, this could be relevant to other subcommittees and their recommendations. Comments that we've raised in other meetings to keep in mind whether recommendations that you're making are really for guidance or best practices compared to regulatory requirements that you are suggesting be crafted in our rules. The more requirements that are included in final adopted rules will carry the expectation that we're not only investigating compliance related to those requirements, but also potentially pursuing administrative action if we see non-compliance. If there are items that you all think in your recommendations are appropriate for licensees, but don't see it as directly impacting public health or safety, for example, then consider whether it could be framed or should be framed more as a suggested best practice, which we could still help reinforce and support compliance around, compared to what you would see as really critical to be developed as a regulatory requirement, which means we are prepared to dedicate resources to specifically monitor, investigate, and enforce around those rules. An example there would be expectations around notification or calling emergency personnel under certain circumstances. And in that case, if the recommendation is that that is developed as a regulation, then we are needing to prepare to monitor and take action if we see non-compliance around that. Allison.
So shifting to the public health and health equity and indigenous and religious use subcommittees, we recognize that these recommendations may not directly impact the Department of Revenue implementation right now, but we, wanted to note that we are tracking those conversations and specifically noting and flagging comments, including that I believe are still pending further discussion related to potential legislative recommendations. So we'll be certainly tracking those recommendations where we can offer insights to assist in those conversations as appropriate. And we're also tracking and reviewing draft recommendations related to equity provisions prepared by Chair Lundy in coordination with other members, and which we've been participated in conversations in a few of the different subcommittees. And what we want to highlight here that we've discussed in those meetings is the need for clear direction in statute regarding eligibility criteria if a separate social equity license is created, and what kind of information we should require or expect from applicants seeking to demonstrate that they qualify as to be licensed. So this isn't news. We've talked about this in other meetings, but just wanted to take the opportunity to flag it as well. And then just lastly, touching on licensing and qualifications, we appreciate the thoughtful conversations the committee has been having regarding facilitator licensing and the pieces that also touch generally on natural medicine business licensing. Because the recommendations have focused more on facilitator licensing, which DOR won't be responsible for, we instead wanted to take this opportunity to flag future questions that this subcommittee may be well situated to address related to business licensing. And this is a topic that we will be delving into in a listening session next week, and we'll be publishing that agenda later today. So thought we would provide a preview to the board of the questions that we're going to start including in that agenda. So some of those questions that we think this subcommittee is well situated to address could be: how should the division define financial interest for purposes of ensuring compliance with statutory provision restricting any one person from having a financial interest in more than 5 licenses? And for an example there, it could be, should financial interest include landlords or investors, owners, or is it more narrow than that? Another question that we'll be posing and interested in the board's thoughts on are what other license privileges may be necessary or desired, for example, a healing center. Is this something like the ability for a healing center to transport natural medicine to a facilitator at authorized locations other than a healing center? And then just one other example of a question that we'll be publishing today is a tiered model for cultivation an appropriate strategy to proactively address concerns related to open production and as a measure to promote equity in this space. So again, just a preview of what we will be diving into in our listening session next week. Something we'll specifically be dedicating time to in the new year is further considering and evaluating what other licenses may be necessary for the division to issue, such as employee licensing or FERPA. So this, I believe, will complement the work that members are already doing for a variety of committees, and following our listening session, I anticipate we will have more questions, insights, and recommendations for the board's consideration in the new year.
Thanks, Allison. And just to wrap us up here, Allison and I will continue to track committee meetings and attend or delegate team members to attend and support those discussions as we are able. We really value the subject matter expertise that we are gaining from the work of this board. Also, as we approach the new year, it's important that we also focus on our work in DOR on ensuring that we are following through with DOR-specific implementation mandates, including our need to prepare to initiate formal rulemaking in early 2024, begin crafting initial rules based on what we are learning from both our listening sessions and these board meetings and recommendations that are getting crafted. We'll also be needing to focus on our development of license applications and processes and programming updates to enable both in-person and ideally online licensing services. These efforts are likely to impact or limit some of our ongoing attendance in committee meetings. But even if that's the case, we want to ensure that we are continuing to leverage these opportunities to connect with you all in full board meetings. That said, importantly, we want to acknowledge expectations that we consult with the board on all of our proposed rules. We intend to leverage both full board meetings and committee meetings as we're able to in order to engage in this consultation and ensure that we are having this ongoing collaboration with as much value as we've seen from that. And as we continue to look at your recommendations that are being developed, we will continue to dive into those recommendations and provide feedback that we believe could be helpful to the board's continued work, and both by providing updates as we have today in the full board meetings, as well as in writing in coordination with our partners at DORA. Also keep in mind that some feedback that we provide may be more detailed than in other areas. For example, as Allison touched on, any board recommendations that focus more on facilitators that may fall out of our scope or not overlap with healing centers, we're likely to have less feedback, or there are certain recommendations where it may warrant or need to have some more context, and that may be the feedback that we're providing as opposed to more substantive feedback around the recommendation itself. So as you continue to build out and refine your recommendations, I just again want to reiterate what Allison highlighted regarding the value of our understanding the why behind your recommendations. Our hope is that for us to be able to read your recommendation and clearly understand your objectives, so we aren't taking things off track as we begin to craft rules with those recommendations in mind. So this concludes our presentation. Please visit our website for additional information and the resources that we've made available there. And for those who haven't subscribed to receive updates from us, on the front page of our website, there's an opportunity to do so. So we encourage that. Thank you.
Thank you both so much. I am reminded of the saying that clear is kind, and I just so appreciate how clear and specific you both are. You also really work well together in sharing. So thank you, both Allison and Dominique. I also just want to acknowledge, I really appreciate how you're not only holding these spaces, but truly listening to stakeholders, particularly Indigenous communities, and also the words that you said on equity, as that's just such a key part to doing this work well, and doing this work well between DOR and DORA. I also want to just open up some space for board members to ask any questions that they may have before we move on. Looks like you covered them all. Thank you, Dominique and Allison. Really appreciate it.
Hey.
Okay, so we are at about 45 minutes in, and now we're switching to agenda item number 4, which is subcommittee updates. We will go subcommittee by subcommittee, but before we do that, I want to pass it to Lori, the program director, to read the preamble.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to make sure that particularly for those in the public that are listening, that we read the preamble every time before we discuss the consolidated recommendations material. So I'll begin. The Natural Medicine Advisory Board's consolidated recommendations document reflects the draft recommendations that the board is developing. The board's work is done pursuant to the Natural Medicine Health Act, and the document is to submit the board's recommendations to the Department of Regulatory Agencies and to the Department of Revenue as required by the Act. The board continues to formulate its draft recommendations. The board's role is to make recommendations to DORA and Revenue. Those state agencies will adopt rules and will administer the Natural Medicine Regulated Access Program. None of the statements in the board's recommendation document carry the force of law, and they should not be construed as any form of law or regulatory guidance as contemplated by the Act. This document should be considered only a working draft of preliminary recommendations that are not legally binding and should not be perceived or construed as such. Readers are recommended not to take any action based on the content of this document. In summary, this document is a resource for the board as it continues to develop recommendations for DORA and Revenue. Recommendations are subject to further changes. This report is neither final nor legally binding. Thank you. Chair.
Thank you so much, Lori. We are going to begin our first update from subcommittees and hear from Emergency Response Safety and Ethics. I got to attend for the first time. I'm not a subcommittee member, so it was lovely to be able to participate as a listener and hear this group jump right in. I'm aware as well that Dr. Connor chaired on behalf of William Dunn, who was absent for that meeting. And also just want to state that I'm going to plan on providing us a break after the subcommittee's update. So I'm going to go ahead and pass the baton to Dr. Connor to provide an update on the subcommittee's work this month.
Thanks, Chair Lundy. I appreciate it. It was a productive meeting we had this past week. We had a couple presentations. One was on the work that I started to do to develop definitions and or potential regulations around authorized locations other than licensed healing centers. And we had a really fruitful conversation of what we might want to do, which led to the potential of examining a recommendation for private residences that would be a special license for individuals who wanted to go into private residences rather than finding ways to license or authorize private residences. So we're still working on developing those definitions and working through that process. We've also answered most of or many of the outstanding questions that are still in front of that subcommittee. We did get back to, or we did add a question, which I think came up in the updates that we were getting from DOR, which is some conversation around whether this board should be making recommendations around types of administration. So whether we would want to limit administration to only ingestion or whether we want to make recommendations around prohibitions for things like vaping or smoking, which, you know, there is not a lot of research around what should be used and what should not be used. That's a question I think we've added to our workload as well. And then we're leaning into starting to think about how to complete the rest of the recommendations. Sorry, I lost my train of thought for a second there. So it was a fruitful meeting. I think we made a lot of progress. We also had a presentation from a group that had wanted to talk to us about screening and had pulled together a screening measure of their own as a suggestion for us to work from. It was really helpful. I don't think that group has a name that they go by, but, or no, yeah, they do. It's the psilocybin, it's the PP. Sam, go ahead, please save me. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, I have to pull it up real quick, but it's PPPP cohort.
Psilocybin public policy. I don't know what the fourth P is.
Trina's watching this. I apologize.
Yeah, we both apologize for that.
I'll find it.
As Sam looks, I'll continue. It was a very fruitful conversation whereby they provided us with a screening document that covered first looking at general physical health that might impact an individual's ability to participate in the regulated market, and then screening for mental and medical health conditions, as well as making some suggestions on how we should track other medications that individuals might be taking. And that led to a pretty fruitful conversation around how we might use screening to exclude individuals from the regulated market or make sure that they get the type of care they need based on elevating them to a higher level of care or being evaluated by an individual with specialty training. And also what came to light a lot was the idea that we don't really have a lot of really good information on interactions between medications that individuals might be taking and natural medicine. And so there might be some value in developing a guide. And so we sent them back with a request for them to update the work that they had done to provide us a little more information. So if someone does indicate that they're taking a medication, what would someone do with that information? And that wasn't included in the document, which is not to say that they hadn't done a great job. It's just that they hadn't gone that far yet because they didn't know if we would receive the screening instrument in a positive way. Now that we have said that we would like the screening instrument, I essentially asked them to go back and give us if someone says yes to this question, what should we do information. So we expect to pick that conversation up at our January meeting and continue to develop that screening tool. Sam.
It is the Psychedelic Public Policy Partnership.
Yeah. Yeah, and it was psychedelic, not psilocybin. I got it. All right, so Psychedelic Public Partnership. Yeah. Anyway, so it was a really good meeting. It was really fruitful, and I think we've gotten a lot of work done. I don't foresee us finishing some of this work ahead of this initial rule-making process. So primarily it's related to the authorized locations other than healing centers, because I think we still have a lot of work to do to figure out how to make sure we're keeping people safe while allowing flexibility in this system. But I think that's where we're at for now, and so I'll yield the floor back to Chair Lundy at this point.
Thank you, Dr. Connor. I will say, it is so fun to see you facilitate meetings. You include more content and detail than most any facilitator of meetings I've seen before. So I appreciate all the work that you all did.
Thank you.
And I want to open up the floor for any board members who have questions, comments, or considerations that they would like to direct to Dr. Connor. Yeah, Skippy.
So thank you. So I had the good fortune to spend a few hours with all of this stuff yesterday and redlined a bunch of big and small things. I won't go into all of those details here, but I do want to share just a few personal observations, both from my own perspective and experience and from what I've learned on other subcommittees that I think would be helpful for this group to look at. Going forward, and I don't know, Dr. Connor or someone else to take some notes on this. And yeah, just starters, I trust in your work, and I'm sure that you guys have far more resource and testimony at your experience than I did reading it when you were writing it. But just to go through a few of these, the first one is the group size. I think my personal perspective, 4 as a number is too low. If we want to have affordable, equitable access, and if we want to provide a framework that will allow for some of the longest standing traditions of medicine practice, we want to see that number probably come up.
Steve, can I interrupt for a second? Sure. Sorry. I just want to make sure that we're on the same page, which is to say that we're not limiting group size to 4, but instead we want a 1-to-4 ratio, right?
Yeah, to 64 with other people. Yes, I do understand that.
So I just want to make sure we were on the same page. I wasn't trying to be correcting in any way. But you're saying you would like to see a different ratio other than 1-to-4.
I do think that would be appropriate. Personal opinion, and you guys may have good information that would lead me back to 4, but yes, at first glance, I do think that's the case. So all I'm asking for in this is just to kind of like consider that from those perspectives. 2, the requirement, as I read it, to have a second non-facilitated licensed person kind of on staff and available at all times. I can see circumstances where that's important, maybe at that, sort of in the higher medical version, but that basically is going to close to double the cost of service delivery, and I don't think it's always required. So I would just ask that we maybe for the 2 lower rungs reconsider if that is required or when it's required.
Sorry, Skip, can I interrupt you again? I apologize. Where does it say a second person is required?
I had read in, and I could pull up, do you want me to pull it up in the doc? I have it redlined, I'm just trying to be quick for people, but I had read in there that a second person, and maybe I misinterpreted it, does not have to be a facilitator or a facilitator license, had to be on premises throughout the duration of the service. And I assume that's so if, someone has a health emergency or they pass out, that there's someone else there, which makes sense logically. And I think there are cases where that is the case. But the reality is to pay someone else to be on staff, to have a facility big enough for a second person, to have the schedule all the time, especially if you're in a rural and remote, just in terms of accessibility, it's like a kind of stab in the heart. And so I think that there are cases on the like wellness side of things or the lower side where that's not necessary, that should be at least explored. Let's see. There's a few things that just don't comport with what we kind of talked about on the Indigenous and Religious subcommittee, that I think should be, I don't want to say reconsider, but should maybe just be thought of through that lens, which are sort of like the complete restriction on any sort of medicine work or healing work with family or with those you have a relationship with. There are much better people to talk to about this than me, but from what I'm learning about that type of traditional practice, that sort of cut parcel to it is the relationality, and it would be very challenging to host a circle, without that. So I think that's one to look at. We've talked about this in our subcommittee, but the no use of intoxicants or medicine as a facilitator. I know we're kind of down the line here, but certainly from an ayahuasca ceremony or a curandero perspective, to not be able to do that piece, to have medicine, would sort of be like the equivalent of asking a Western trained surgeon to not have their scalpel for ceremony. So I think that just needs to be looked at. Same thing with medicine combinations. That's both from an Indigenous perspective, but also I think there's some early research coming out on the combination of, say, MDMA and psilocybin as it relates to PTSD. So just something to think about. And then the last one from this grouping is the no home cooked foods. I understand a food safety thing, but if you're at a weekend retreat, for instance, and I think that experience really shifts. So I just think that's another one from kind of all perspectives to be looked at.
So I interrupt again. I don't know where it says that they're not allowed to use home cooked food. I don't ever seen that. Where did
I can pull up the specific line. It would just take me a little bit to find it.
I'm not trying to get you to prove your concept. I'm not. Hopefully, I feel that way. But it's to say, if I want to make recommendations to Chair Dunn about the work the subcommittee is doing, I'd like to know where it exists, because I don't remember that being discussed. I think we discussed that they couldn't use home cooked foods to mix their natural medicines with, but we wouldn't necessarily prohibit them from ingesting food that they brought with them, like if they wanted a snack during the service. So we were like, that was a discussion we had this past meeting, was this idea that if we wanted to, we were having a conversation about the difference between preparation versus production, and with this idea that if a participant wanted to bring something from home to mix the psilocybin into to make it more palatable. So for instance, I think the recommendation from Dr. Goodwin was to use the conversation we had around how to do this from Dr. Goodwin was to use peanut butter. We would want them to bring in packaged peanut butter that was still sealed, so we knew that it didn't contain adulterants or things that might create a cross-contamination or toxicity.
Understood. And I did read a separate part that I didn't flag, which was kind of about the mixing of things that you could do it in the room in certain circumstance. My memory says this was different. It might not be. I'm trying to do a word search right now, thinking that the word cook is not common in this document.
And Dr. Connor, I think, Skippy, let's focus on your synthesis of points. And then if you want to do any references, to send those to Lori so that they can forward it on to Dr. Connor. So we don't have to get into the veins of the document.
Sure.
Real briefly, Skippy, I want you to hold your point. I saw Sam's hand come up, so let's hear from Sam real quick, and then we can continue on.
I was just going to mention, I think some I think what you're redlining, and I can't remember if maybe it was the table, if you were looking at a table when you were redlining it. So that was specifically at a healing center. What we were saying for a healing center, we're talking about like authorized personnel for staff at those locations, or at the healing center, not other authorized locations. But if you could just send us the redlining so we could share it with everyone, that would be really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, 100% said the red lines, and also own that I could be misreading something, misinterpreting. Like I said, I have way less information than you guys, but I do think these things are helpful raised just to look at this point.
If I get one more thing to make 2 good points. First, Chair Levy, thank you very much. I think it's a great suggestion to keep us on track. If we could get a copy of the red line, that would be great. And if it was in a table, it might also be things that we haven't yet come to address that Dr. Goodwin pulled from the Oregon regulations that we might implement. But we were going through those step by step to edit them. And so I don't know if you were looking at the ones that have already been edited or if they might be ones that have been pulled from Oregon regulations but haven't been addressed yet. So just as points, because some of them are surprising to me. That's the only reason I make that. And now I'll be quiet. Sorry.
No, that's great. I appreciate you paying attention and taking it seriously. And I will send over the whole doc. That's not an issue. The only other thing that I have noted here is that some of the things are not in congruence yet with the code of ethics as proposed. And so just making sure that those 2 things match. And that's the last one. Thanks for hanging in there with me. It's a lot.
Yeah, Skippy, I just want to say thank you for coming with such a robust set of points and looking at the intersections of all sides of this work. Dr. Sicily, I've seen your hand up for a bit. Let's hear from you. Did we lose Dr. Sicily in the conversation? You're on mute if you're trying to speak, Dr. Sicily.
Is that better?
We hear you now.
Sorry about that, guys. Yeah, I just wanted to ask you guys, I was reading about the potential for a 30 milligram, like a ceiling dose that was being recommended. Was that out of this subcommittee or another group?
It would be either this subcommittee or product data research, and I am unfortunately the lines for me are not clear between these 2 subcommittees right now because I've been chairing the last 2 subcommittee meetings for ethics. No criticism, Chair Dunn, in that, and when I say that, but we did discuss having 30 milligrams being an upper cap until there was better research on dosing.
Okay, so do you think that will end up in the final recommendation? Because I'm not sure I agree with that, and I don't know, Chair, if this is the right time to discuss it, because I didn't know if this was the subcommittee that dealt with it or not, but I don't agree with that strategy, so.
We would definitely love to hear your perspective. I see, Dr. Goodwin, you're raising a couple hands now. Is there something you want to briefly add to Dr. Sicily's point?
It's not the subcommittee. We haven't talked about the cap yet. That's the first time I've heard it. So it must be the other products. Just want to
okay.
Exactly.
Yeah, and then I'll hold it until then. I just want to check with you. Thank you.
I think you have the floor, and it applies to both subcommittees. So if you want to do Dr. Sicily while you have the floor, I'd be happy to hear it because I've been chairing both those subcommittees. So I don't know. Well, Chair Lundy, actually, I'll defer to you. I shouldn't run this. You shouldn't run your meeting for you.
I appreciate all the respect. I think, Dr. Sicily, we would love to hear a synthesis of your thought, and then we can expand the conversation within the subcommittee if we need to.
Okay, I just wanted to convey that there are some clinical trials happening now that are utilizing a 50 milligram dose of pure psilocybin, which is potentially much more challenging, dangerous than actually the safety issues around the natural mushroom. So getting a 50 milligram dose within a natural fruiting body and having the benefits of all these other alkaloids and tryptamines buffering negative effects is probably less problematic. My point is that the 50 milligram dose is being studied. The early data back on this is that it is safe and well tolerated. And I want to make sure that data has not yet been published, but I'm talking to investigators there's a study going on at University of Wisconsin with using psilocybin for methamphetamine, and 50 milligram dose is well tolerated. So in anticipation of that article getting published, I just want to make sure that we don't eradicate the opportunity to use enough medicine for people who need it. And maybe one thing I would probably embrace is the idea of saying, well, a 50 milligram dose maybe shouldn't be employed during the first session, but I would be okay with that. But I don't want to put a cap on it and tie the hands of these providers who may need access to that high amount.
Thanks for those points. I think, yeah, I mean, we based the 30 milligram upper limit based on, and that, now that Dr. Goyne has refreshed my memory, I remember that it was definitely the products and was the other individuals of the non-voting participants who were suggesting 30 as an upper cap. And, you know, I think, Dr. Sissi, your points are well made, and I wonder still the differences between synthetic psilocybin and the natural medicine psilocybin that we're talking about here. And I agree with you. I would assume that the natural medicine, because of the other compounds present, would likely be safer than 50 milligrams of synthetic psilocybin. So I think it's something, you know, I think the recommendation more broadly might be just say in line with what's in the published research rather than putting a specific number in it. But we were also tying milligram to the length of time that an individual would spend in an administration session. And so I think that, you know, we were talking about 5 to 6 hours or 5 hours for individuals receiving 25 milligrams or up to 30 milligrams. Oh, gee, let me try again. Let me start over. 3 hours for individuals receiving between 1 and 10 milligrams of psilocybin. And then could be extended based on the discretion of the facilitator. And then 5 hours of 5 hours of facilitation based on 11 to 30 milligrams of psilocybin being administered. And that also could be extended based on the judgment of the facilitator. And so I think in some ways we were trying to make sure we were capping based on what we'd seen in the literature, and also making sure we were providing guidelines for how long a facilitated session needed to be. And so I think if there's a way to get us access to that research, that would be really helpful. I know that, you know, I published, so I know what the publication process looks like. And I know that some of the data might be embargoed, but if we could see some of that results, it would help us to make those determinations. And I agree with you. I think the system needs to be flexible so that individuals can receive the amount of medicine they need in order to have therapeutic benefit.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sicily. I really appreciate that point. I do see your hand still up. Did you have more you wanted to say?
Oh, no, sorry. Taking it down.
Chair, if I could ask for discretion for one more thing. Given that I won't get to talk to Dr. Hannum about this topic again until our next meeting, Dr. Hannum has been working on potentially developing a flow chart around the assessment procedures that I alluded to that we discussed based on the screening measure, and Dr. Hannum had to step out from that meeting. So I just wanted to make sure that Dr. Hannum had a second to ask any questions that she might have about the data collection screening tool that we got a presentation on, and to make sure that I don't know, I just wanted to give us a chance to talk since we have to do so in a public space, if that's all right.
Thank you, Dr. Carter. So it sounds like they're going to provide a flow chart too. So does it make the most sense to wait till we see that product? Or are you thinking their screening measure over yours?
So the way I've envisioned it right now, based on what I saw that they presented, was that the tool that they have is sufficient, that it would likely be satisfying for an initial screening to potentially determine the level of or the sphere of care that an individual needs to be referred to. And their flow chart was likely going to point to what further assessments might be needed. And so, but more importantly, I've asked them to focus on the pharmacokinetic side, because we have licensed psychologists on the board who can develop the flow chart for the mental health side. And so if I were you, and certainly not telling you how to do your job, but if I were you, I would focus on the flow chart for mental health and see what they come back with for both physical health and pharmacology, because that's where they were going to focus their attention.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, and, you know, I've said this in terms of transparency before, but I was a part of that group before I joined this board. That's how I ended up on this board. So they also have a lot of licensed
You got muted right in the middle while you were...
Yeah, just to be fair. So yeah, I'm grateful for that information though. Thank you, Dr. Carr.
Yeah, I would, and the way I divided it was not to remove expertise from the individual, but instead to try to streamline the work, because it seemed like it might be a fair amount of work that I asked them to turn around by January, I think a week prior to the next meeting. The next meeting is scheduled for January 10th. So, you know, so I asked them to turn that flowchart information around back to us by January 3rd. And so in order to make sure they could get it done and to give you a better sense of where we might need your expertise, I just separated mental health out because it seemed to make the most sense based on what they were presenting. So again, asked them to focus on pharmacokinetics and medicine since we could cover the mental health side.
Thank you, Dr. Connor.
Thank you.
All right, thank you both. And those who may be listening for the first time, just a reminder, board members do not interact whatsoever between meetings. To protect against a public meeting, we keep our interactions here. So I appreciate you making the most of your time, Dr. Connor. And also wanted to just briefly go back to Dr. Sicily. I really appreciate your foresight and the fact that clinical research is ever happening. So if there are any written materials that do surface that can help inform that 50 milligram dose that you could share with Sam and Lori, would definitely like to see those materials. I know that might not be possible.
Yeah, I'll check with the PI, definitely. Thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah, you bet. Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions for Dr. Connor about, yes, Dr. Goodwin?
It's not a question for Dr. Connor, but I just want to say something to Skip. Well, he's off now. But anyone who's going to kind of look at the policy, you know, we're looking at this from a safety lens, and we're operating under the assumption that, you know, it's not going to really impact religious ceremony, that they're probably going to be exempt from a lot of these things. And so we are building this kind of for that regulated market. And, you know, if you have, like he was talking about having a minder there, we spent an entire meeting on going to the bathroom and like, can they go on their own? And what happens if, you know, oh, hey, Skippy, I'm talking to you, by the way. Welcome back. So, I'm just
Sorry, my computer almost died and I had to find the charger. So start over. I didn't hear you.
Well, it's all good. I was just saying that, and I'll just recap that one piece, is that we're in that committee, we're operating under the assumption that a lot of the ceremonial use is going to be exempt from this, and that we're kind of building it for that regulated piece. And we had these conversations, like we had one entire meeting about going to the bathroom and can they go on their own? What happens if they go somewhere else and they're gone for 45 minutes? And so, you know, that's why we talked about having a minder that could go with that person while the facilitator is there with everyone else. And so we're having these discussions. Well, like we used to say in the military, if you're 100% safe, you're not doing anything. And, you know, if you're 100% reckless, then people are dying. And so we want to kind of meet somewhere in the middle. And so in these suggestions, if you have like a different number, or hey, I think it might be better than this, if you could throw a little Y in there so we could weigh that against really what we're trying to do, that would be super helpful for us, just because we are kind of building it in a vacuum, right? Okay, for the most safety, what are we looking at? But if you need to make some concessions, it'll be easier if we have something to weigh it against.
I appreciate that. And I just sent the red lines over to Sam and Lori. They're my background notes. They're probably not super helpful. It might even be helpful for me to like drop into one of the meetings. So what I'm going to share now in response is not an indictment of your process at all. We're like super lucky to have you guys and girls and everyone, all the people, all the gender. But I honestly think, this is now my personal perspective and nothing more, I think the idea of those things, those indigenous or traditional practices, is not something we need to consider as a mistake. And I think it's a mistake because this is not going to be this and that. I mean, aside from the part of like, we don't want to relegate those type of traditional practices to second-class citizenship, which is what would happen if we think that way. But even more broadly, there is not a like Western or a modern healer or facilitator who hasn't learned from and wants to bring elements of those into their place, right? They're not going to find one-to-one ayahuasca ceremonies, right? It's just not how it works. And I know that we're on psilocybin now, but any number of those practices, from root practice to shared, like those will be things that people want to do. And so I think they really need to be thinking about that for that reason. And then just from a cost standpoint, if we're buying into the Western idea that this is only successful with a highly trained facilitator over a large number of hours in a modern facility with all of the bells and whistles of security and somebody in the other room, what we're saying is if you're in a city, unless you have $2,500, you're not doing this. And if you're in a rural place like I am, unless you have $7,000, you're not doing this. And I don't think that's what any of us want.
Definitely. Thank you, Skippy. And I just want to add as well, I appreciate all the clarifications and also that, we have a robust amount of wisdom to glean from Indigenous communities that can help inform the regulated space, and that it's essential for us to integrate that wisdom and invite ourselves to potentially challenge preconceived notions that we have from Western modalities that we've been trained in that have also been connected to overculture and dynamics that have historically marginalized Indigenous communities. One of the reasons I wanted to be on this board is because we get to work together and create an integrated model within the regulated space. So with that, I also would like to hear from Dr. Estes. I see your hand is up.
Lana, blessed return of the light. This is the time of the year when the light comes out of the dark for us too. I wanted to recognize Dr. Connor. Dr. Connor, you are meticulous in what you've been doing. I really appreciate that. I've been reading your piece. I don't understand everything I read. I have dyslexia, so I'm a slow reader. But I do read it more than once so I can gather as much as I can. And the detail that you put it in is really good. Skippy, Dr. Cicely, your thoughts are really appreciated by me in particular, in part because the perspective that we have, those of us who work in what we think of as our plant medicine, that we brought it, we preserved it, we cared it, we cultivated it, we made sure people were safe with it. And it's a little startling to see it in the hands of people who don't have the root stock that we have. Not to say there's anything wrong with that, just saying that the questions that people have, in listening to Skippy and listening to Dr. Cicely and other people, it's a lot like having a field of many different plants. And as you see, when you first plant the seeds, which you pick through carefully before you plant seeds, you don't plant every seed. There's some of coming to fruition. You sometimes have to move the cuttings, you have to move the young plants to more hospitable environments. So the first planter, or even the second or the third, for that field is not static. It doesn't remain the same. You move things to where they can thrive the most. And I hope you understand what I'm saying. I appreciate very much the seeds that have been chosen, the planting that you've done, the great organization we got. Incredible. There's so many elements. It looks like there's thousands of elements and considerations. It's a huge undertaking for all of us. And you've done a good job of it. And I just wanted to say that much in the book. So thank you for this too.
Thank you so much, Dr. Estes. Dr. Connor, would you like to respond?
I don't have a lot to say. The one thing that I think, as much as I appreciate the overall structure of the board and then the subcommittees, I think it invariably creates insulation and somewhat of silos. And so I think that the full board meetings do a really good job, but often we have a packed agenda and we don't get time to just sit and talk across subcommittees. And so I think that there might be some value there. Because if we think about all the perspectives that have been presented in the last couple minutes, obviously they're all of vital importance. And the work, I think, as Dr. Gould was pointing out, the work that the safety committee is really focusing on is keeping people safe, which would also include not creating too much space on the ceremonial side, so that individuals who may have nefarious motivations can find an easier route or a back door into a system that would afford less protection for the participant. And so I think there's this really delicate balance that we have to attend to, and I think it's really difficult when we're siloed. And I think so maybe one of the things for us to think about is whether we can create more time and space in these meetings to have these discussions at a little more length with some ability to prepare for them a little bit in advance. But that's just a suggestion, and I do appreciate everybody's perspectives. I think they're all really important, and it's difficult to I think I'll borrow some of your language, Chair Lundy, to weave these into a cloth that's going to be a whole cloth, right? So I think it's important for us to hear them.
Yeah, absolutely. And Dr. Estes, I saw your hand just go up again. I'll pass the baton back to you in just a second. But to your statement, Dr. Connor, a request that I have, and I'm going to direct this to Sam and Lori, is that at the January subcommittees, if we could bring to subcommittees perspectives from other subcommittees that inform that subcommittee, right? So we've heard some perspectives from Skippy about how emergency and response can learn from the Indigenous subcommittee. So I just ask that if there's any intersectional conversation that can happen within January, that be brought to light. Because I know that even being on the Public Health and Equity subcommittee, we have a unique lens through which we're looking at the impact of these recommendations. And I know I would love for the emergency subcommittee to consider some of our perspectives as well within that subcommittee. So I know the January full board meeting is going to be a space for us to talk about our recommendations across the different intersections, but I also think being prompted for gaps that other subcommittees may see within yours is something for us to discuss in those ways. And also just again, an invitation that board members can attend subcommittees they're not formally part of to help provide your perspective. With a double acknowledgement that we all have had a lot of meetings we've been attending this whole year. So I think that there's a couple of ways we can address what you're talking about, Dr. Connor, but I share your desire and also concern. So that's on my mind for January in particular, but any way that we can build on that together through our subcommittee work as well. I'm going to briefly hand it back to Dr. Estes for a final thought, and then I see the other hands.
Just to add to what Dr. Connor just said about charlatanism coming in through the indigenous inspiration. This morning in the Washington Post, I read about a licensed Asian family counselor in Washington, D.C., who is being accused of billing $250,000 in false billing for work that was never done. I just wanted to remark that it actually comes from every single sphere. Charlatanism, from Western medicine, from our traditional medicine, but anywhere there's an opportunity or opening for a person to grift, they are often attracted to it. So just wanted to add that part to it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Dr. Connor.
Yeah, just as a quick response, Dr. Piccolo Estes, I really appreciate you making that point. And I think this is a point where maybe I wasn't clear. I don't expect that individuals who exist in the ceremonial space or the spiritual space or the indigenous space would be the charlatans. But what I'm trying to do is protect that. I think what the subcommittee has really been focusing on is trying to protect that space so that individuals who are not from that community don't invade that space and potentially take advantage of it. So hopefully I didn't misspeak or imply that individuals from that space would be the charlatans, but instead people trying to use the religious, spiritual, indigenous carve out as a loophole to gain some advantage who aren't originally from that community. That's my biggest concern, is about invasion into that community, not things that community might try to do that are nefarious.
Appreciate that, Dr. Connor. We already deal with that. We have, since the first people arrived in our land,
yes,
hundreds, we have dealt with it and we deal with it almost every day right now. Well, let's just say they pretend. Let's put it. So thank you. I appreciate it.
I appreciate you.
Well, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you both. Dr. Chavez.
I just wanted to share that Skippy shared a lot, and I appreciated all of what he was saying because they were such important points that he was making for us to consider. All of the things that he talked about, for me, what was really touching was the size of the groups. I have not participated in sacred mushroom ceremonies in the United States, but I have in Central and South America, and a facilitator often has a group of 10 or 12, and that's very common, and with a helper or an assistant. that is there alongside that person. And it goes back to what Dr. Goodman was talking about with regards to going to the bathroom. Because, sometimes these ceremonies may be held in nature, they're always held in a setting which there may be a building, but the majority of individuals choose to have the experience outdoors in nature. And going to the restroom is also a consideration. Speaking for myself, I noticed that the younger people under the influence of the medicine can go to the bathroom easier, but even me as a 65-year-old woman, my body moves differently. My sensory system works differently now than it did when I was in my 20s or 30s. And, under the influence of the medicine, I noticed that. So I communicated that to the facilitators who said, we need to rethink how we go to the bathroom out in nature, making sure that the ground is level. So there are all of these things to consider. And so I think we're bringing up very important points, and to spend a whole meeting on going to the restroom, I actually see the relevancy in that. That's an important detail to consider. And, having someone go with the individual so they don't take off for 45 minutes, and that that piece of the safety is being considered. And then, I appreciated what Dr. Connor said about the back door and what Dr. E is talking about, because we've seen a lot of people come in the back door, and then the indigenous.
Oh, we briefly lost you, Dr. Chavez. Oh, I think your audio cut out. We were with you. I'm going to give you a second. Go ahead and see if we can get the audio reconnected, and I'll come back to you after Skippy. My apologies. Really appreciate what you were saying. Yeah, Skippy.
Me too. And part of this is directed to Dr. Chavez, so I hope she can hear. Which is all I was going to say is I have scheduled to make at least the first hour of the next emergency subcommittee on January 10th. And I think it would be super helpful if another, whether it's a board member or non-voting member who is a group facilitator, also comes, because I can speak to my experience as a participant, as a patient, and as someone who kind of understands the process of running things. But if I was on that board, my next natural question is like, well, what's the right number? Why? And I'm not a facilitator. So I just wanted to say, whether it's Dr. D, Dr. Chavez, or someone else, I think it would be super helpful to have someone who does that work there.
Thank you, Skip. We appreciate it.
Absolutely. And Dr. Chavez, can we hear you now? Oh, no. Okay. Well, I'm going to go to Dr. Goodwin, and if you find audio, please raise your hand again, and we would love to hear from you. Dr. Goodwin.
Maybe I just recommend get there for an hour or two if you can. Just like every meeting, it takes us 40 minutes to get through all the roll call and everything. So
I'll do that. I'll switch my schedule.
Yeah, come in at 2. Yeah, that'd be better. Thanks.
Good point, Dr. Goodwin. I appreciate that. Yeah, and I was going to make that ask if there's any way we can have participants to shed broader perspective about models of work that could guide this subcommittee, and or if there's any materials, any articles or links that we could receive. Please send them to Sam and Lori so that we can make sure that we do get as wide and diverse and informative of perspectives as we can. That's essential to doing this work well. All right, Dr. Chavez, I'm gonna give one more chance before we move on to see, it's not your only chance in the meeting, but within this subcommittee discussion, how are we doing on audio? Still struggling? Okay. Well, I see your mouth moving in a smile, so sending it back, and feel free to raise your hand later on in the meeting. With that being said, are there any final questions or considerations anyone would like to direct to Dr. Connor and the emergency subcommittee? Okay, seeing none, we're going to go ahead and take a 10-minute break. The board will take a short break, and we will return at 2:44, I will say. Please ensure that all cameras are turned off and everyone is muted during the break. This meeting will resume at 2:44.
I think so.
Welcome back, everyone. It is 2:44. Chairperson Lundy here. And we are going to continue on with agenda item number 4. And we get to hear now from Subcommittee Chair Billy Lynn, who oversees the Public Health and Equity Subcommittee. Billy, I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you very much, Chair. So this subcommittee met yesterday, and I'll provide just a brief overview of what we discussed and agreed to and plan to do in the near future, at least as I understood it, and certainly welcome other subcommittee members to join in and add their own perspectives to what we have done. So the first is that we voted on and approved to adopt recommendations, 2 recommendations that we had revised from an earlier meeting. The first one relates to the inclusion to the degree feasible and to the degree that it does not increase licensing costs, that the state include factors relating to equity in the annual report that it's required to issue regarding this program. The second relates to the state pursuing, again, as practicable and cost-effective, the inclusion of a payment application or a third-party financial mechanism whereby licensees can the state can receive license fees in their entirety up front, but the licensees may have an option to make those payments over time through that third-party vendor carrying that float. We talked about sort of relatively routine vendors like PayPal, et cetera. And we understood there are some reservations and that this may be perhaps a later term recommendation, but in the spirit of equity and the overall difficulty we are finding, frankly, in ways that are going to keep costs down at all for licensees and others involved in the program, we felt that it was important to make that statement. We also ended up discussing and revising a prior recommendation relating to clarifying the ability of facilitators to procure natural medicine independently at healing centers so that they are otherwise independent of healing centers and able to practice in the field on their own. Oh, I'm very sorry about that. Didn't hear the call to me by phone. We didn't hear that. Anyway, and decided that after excellent input from the AG and a good discussion, I decided to reframe that so that it's really a 2-part recommendation. The first recommendation is that the state should implement regulations that permit facilitators to access or to obtain and store and otherwise manage natural medicine independently of healing centers so that they can practice independently of healing centers if they choose to, with the kind of hope and expectation that we can read the relevant statutes in that way. And Part B is a legislative recommendation to clarify any perceived ambiguity in the statute that facilitators are not allowed to procure natural medicine independently at healing centers. Then we talked about, we spent a good amount of time talking about and ended up adopting by a 4-to-1 vote. We did have one subcommittee member who had enough concern about this recommendation that they voted no. So I wanted to, otherwise, I think it's fair to say that our recommendations that have been adopted have been unanimous. That anyone was very welcome to correct it and misperceive that. That the state should promulgate regulations allowing natural medicine services to be furnished out in private residences, both the private residence of the consumer and the private residence of the facilitator. And this one, as arguably most of what we do at our subcommittee overlaps with the work of other subcommittees, and we've been fairly, I think, I would say, kind of self-conscious about our role in a good way as the equity subcommittee, and that we obviously are trying to really focus on improving the equity of this program, and even we are choosing in some of these instances to sort of send our 5-person message to the rest of the board and to other subcommittees where relevant, that we think that this particular recommendation is important for the purpose of advancing equity, and we understand that there may be other considerations that others will consider, and we understand that there may be other considerations that the state may take into account in finalizing their regulations. But again, we want to kind of lean in on improving the equity of this program as much as we possibly can. The last thing that I want to say is that we agreed to tee up a host of additional ideas that are on our table, and try to work through them as deliberately and quickly as we can in our January meeting, in hopes that we can produce as many helpful, positive recommendations in time for inclusion in the first kind of batch of what the board will ultimately produce. And so we're going to be doing some work in between time, before the next subcommittee meeting, to make sure that all of the prioritized potential ideas and recommendations are ready to go at that January meeting. And we're going to be ready to really dig in and hustle through that, so that there's been, I'd say, kind of an apples to apples consideration, all of the good ideas that are on the table for our subcommittee. So that's what I got for you. And again, welcome others to add and amend, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Billy. I think I would just briefly add, as we also open the floor, if anybody wants to raise their hands after I speak, I'll call on you, that I just appreciate how you held yesterday's conversation. I was brought on to the board for equity, as a transgender person, as a therapist, as someone who creates companies for the uninsured. I just really appreciated how much the subcommittee said we will find creative solutions and we will thoughtfully make recommendations together. So thank you so much for a beautiful synthesis of what we did yesterday, but also the robust discussion that we got to have together. Is there anybody who has any questions or considerations? Yes, Dr. Connor.
Amanda, can we put the slide back up that was there before a second ago? Thanks. Just because there's some work here that seems to be being delegated to the subcommittee that I chair, I figured I would follow up with a couple of questions about those things for Billy directly, if that's all right. First, I think that the definition offered here is quite good, and I like it a lot for point 1. And then for point 2, and I know these aren't the two that referred to my subcommittee, but just as a clarification for what you're recommending here, is you're not recommending that let me say that differently. Are you recommending that the state find a clear pathway for facilitators with other licenses to be able to bill for facilitation, for other administration, or for the other services that they're being provided around administration?
So recommendation number 2 relates
is in line with or around with the administration of natural medicine, I wouldn't get any reimbursement from Medicaid for the administration of natural medicine, but I would for all the other services I provide. Now, I might be misreading that, but that's just this is more of a personal. I think it's a really good point, and I think it's interesting. The one thing I keep in mind is that I'll leave it there. It's a good book. I'll leave it. I'll go to the next two. So then, for the purpose of promoting research and innovation in natural medicine, as well as reducing the cost of relevant liability insurance, the state shall make public all de-identified data collected under the National Medicine Access Program. All data must be aggregated to preclude the identification of personal health information. I think that's a really good recommendation. We've had some discussion both in the subcommittee, and then there was discussion in the listening session the DOR held around these elements. And so the statute requires certain data to be collected. It's likely that the subcommittee is going to recommend that data collection be expanded. And here, the only thing I'd push back on as well here is to think about this idea about whether all de-identified data collected in the National Medicine Access Program should be released. Once you start to, whether that is the case or whether there may be different types of data that get released versus different types of data that people would have to apply to get access to. And the reason I say that here is this idea that there's a pretty good opportunity in the state if we can implement the data collection in the right way, where we could we could gain a secondary benefit from the regulated market of being able to conduct observational research studies that are not currently being funded by the federal government or even private industry as much as they need to be, which might help us determine stability of products over time as they're stored. It might help us determine what appropriate doses are for certain presentations and things like that. And some of that data is likely to be sensitive data. And so I wonder if 3 could potentially be revised once it's sent to us to be a little more nuanced than a blanket statement about the release of all data or all de-identified data, and wondering how the subcommittee might respond to a more nuanced approach to the data availability.
Yeah, well, I'll speak for myself and say that, we're certainly open to, your point of view and any other information you have about what's wise here. I think that the question I have is, what is I guess not here, it can be later, but I'm wondering what is an example of the type of data that is too sensitive to share with the public, but is, shareable with researchers?
It's this idea, so if we have diagnostic information that's tied to dose, individuals might look at publicly available data and determine if they see an individual has a diagnosis of major depression that's treatment resistant with suicidality, and then they see that individuals have been getting 30 milligram doses when they have that diagnosis, so they determine that 30 milligram dose is what they should be given, because we haven't run the statistics to show if that's a significant effect or something like that, right? So the idea is to say, I think there might be data specific to research questions which the public may not need access to nor understand, and might be misleading if presented in an aggregate form without statistical inference attached to it to understand its importance. Hold on, let me see if I can say that again and not sound like a numbers person. There might be data that could be misleading without statistical tests on it to show what it really is showing. And that's what my concern would be. And I would, again, thinking with both hats, both the data subcommittee and then the safety subcommittee, I would hate for the data to mislead people about the way that natural medicines should be used to treat certain conditions.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And it's been a couple months since the subcommittee discussed this, so I'd be pretending to remember kind of the nuances of our discussion around, but we certainly take that point to heart. And I think that, I guess the spirit of it is to lean, and this is going to be the state's data, and that therefore it should be as transparent as possible. But bona fide concerns around safety and public misinterpretation are certainly, valid and appreciated.
Carolyn, your mic come off. So I say off mute, so I'll pause for you here.
Well, I was just going to say, I think one additional point on top of what you're making from an equity lens, I know a significant concern of mine is the lack of diversity represented within trials, whether it's communities of color, queer communities, folks that historically have not had as much representation in these clinical studies, and yet we're making these overarching decisions. So I think from an equity lens, that's an additional thing on my mind.
Yeah, and that's actually become a real big focus of the research I do when I'm not working for the Natural Medicine Advisory Board, in terms of understanding those erased identities and how they can be represented and be heard, and so I think it's a really important point as well, but and something to pay attention to. And then the last piece, if I could, for point 3, for interoperability is to think about this idea that if we're going to do that, we have to find a way to fund it. And that's the one thing that the data subcommittee has been trying to wrestle with is how do we support funding the availability, the collection of, and then the availability of data, because somebody has to manage that somewhere. And so I think thinking about that from an equity lens would be helpful as well.
Yeah, and I particularly want to invite it if Sam wants to, or Lori wants to add any context to that specific point Dr. Connor's making about where we are with data.
Dr. new approach of raising multiple hands to get attention is an interesting one to me.
It's like dancing hands.
Yes.
I just want to put some context in here. If I remember correctly, the funding these kind of reports was one of the questions, and we talked about that there are a bunch of nonprofits out trying to do this work, and that was part of the spirit of intent of allowing this data out to the public, so the nonprofits and all these organizations who are doing this anyway could put this stuff together, and it in turn would give like the insurance companies the ability to gather data from multiple resources. And so it wasn't just pigeonholed into something the state was doing only. And I just want to throw that context in. I remember that being part of the discussion as to why it was written this way, just to get as many hands in the fight as they could. Thanks.
Chair Lundy, if I could.
Please.
I appreciate that perspective. And again, the point here is that the vision for the product data safety, whatever the subcommittee, the product and data subcommittee is that we would create an electronic record system whereby there'd be mandatory reporting of certain amounts of data so that researchers, clinicians, nonprofits could all have access to the data, because it would be revolutionary to use to be excited about it. Like, nobody has the kind of data that we could be generating, and I think that there are a number of lenses that need to be put in place as we're thinking about how we can collect that data and how we can use that data to make sure that it's equitable, make sure that access is fair and equal to all, and to make sure that we're not misrepresenting perspectives. But again, what it comes back to for me is if we want something that rich, we have to figure out how to pay for it, and we don't want that to be transferred to the participant in the end. Those costs to necessarily be transferred to the participant in the end. I've dominated this conversation, but I do have a question on point 4. Chair Lundy, do you want to go to others and come back to me, or should I finish up and then get out of the way?
Go ahead and finish it up.
So point 4, thank you, I appreciate that. The legislature should clarify that the National Medicine and Health Act to allow facilitators to purchase natural medicine products and cultivators or distributors without affiliation with a healing center. So I think this is a good point, and most of the work we've done so far is in thinking about healing centers and not facilitators that would operate without some sort of affiliation to a healing center. And so we'll definitely have to do some thinking on it. But then you also made the point about having facilitators facilitate in their own private residences from an equity perspective. And I think that the safety subcommittee was leaning more towards the idea of creating an additional license for, and this is still in the, before I say these things, I want to make sure we're very clear, this is still in the development phase. The subcommittee first saw my definitions Wednesday. And so nothing we're saying here is anything that's anywhere close to done, but was this idea of creating an additional license for individuals who wanted to facilitate in private residences, which would require a bit of specialty training of what it means to provide services in somebody else's home, and then was leaning towards not permitting facilitators to use their own residence as an authorized location other than a healing center, but instead potentially pursuing having their residence becoming a healing center. And so we're in a slightly different space right now, but again, we've just started having these conversations. I don't know if anybody on that subcommittee wants to respond, but.
Billy?
I mean, I appreciate that perspective, and we talked about zoning. We talked about we felt that there were maybe additional concerns about allowing the practice in a facilitator's home rather than or that weren't present when you're talking about them going to the consumer's home. And we acknowledge that there's lots of medical services, particularly emergency medical services, but other types of medical services that get furnished in patients' homes, and that patient's home doesn't become a commercial enterprise or a healing center or a clinical care site because that is occurring on a temporary basis.
Right.
So we understood that, and I guess again this especially with regard, I'd say, to the again, only speaking for myself, the facilitator, that we did acknowledge there's significant kind of concerns and barriers there, but just again in the spirit of equity, wanted to lead in favor of that, so that they kind of have a lower cost site to do their practice, and wouldn't be forced to buy into a higher cost site.
Yeah, and so in order to answer that first point, in order to avoid the commercialization of an individual's private residence who is serving as a participant, that's why we shifted away. My original development of definitions was to have an individual's home be authorized by a participant basis, but through the conversation that we had in the subcommittee meeting on Wednesday, we shifted that definition to instead be, if there's a facilitator who wants to go into participants' homes, they need to get an additional license, and then they can. And that came from, so the individuals who are presenting from the I'm not going to try to remember maybe I'm going to try psychedelic public policy partnership, had also had a lot of experience in hospice care and going into individual homes, and they were the one that suggested this shift to us, whereby rather than trying to license a person's home or authorize a person's home, you authorize the facilitator who wants to provide those services, train them to be able to understand the inherent risks of going into somebody else's home, train them on what the things they need to do to keep themselves safe, which may be another license or an add-on to the facilitator license, and then they can just on their own go into people's homes. So we wouldn't even need to have individuals seeking authorization for facilitation in their private home. They would just need to find a facilitator who has that add-on to their license to go and do that. And that seemed to be the equitable solution in that moment. So we've edited that document, and I plan to ask Lori and Sam to share the document on those definitions of authorized locations other than licensed healing centers to all the subcommittees to get feedback from you all on those things as well. But that was that first step, and then the second step is this idea around the private residence of the facilitator. Again, thinking about what that might mean to have participants come to your home. The idea is, I would, as a psychotherapist, I would not want my clients in my home. I wouldn't want it. And I know it's a different type of practice. I know it's not the same level of facility. There's a lot of different factors, but there are ethical standards that we would follow. So if I were going to provide services in my own home, I would have a separate space with its own entrance that was clearly marked as the space whereby I was operating as a psychotherapist. And I think you would probably want to see similar rules here if you were going to allow for facilitators to use their own residences, that they wouldn't necessarily be bringing participants in and having them go into their bedroom and lay in their bed while they're being facilitated. But maybe I'm wrong. But I think there still need to be some encapsulation of an administrative space, if that makes sense.
That does. Thank you. And I want to get to Skippy. You've been waiting very patiently. I did want to ask you very briefly, Dr. If this opens a can of worms, then if it's a complicated answer, then let's table it. But if you're a therapist, right? I mean, can you go to a patient's, if you want to, and they are okay with it, can you go to a patient's house and provide therapy, or do is that legally permitted, and do you need a special license to do that?
So I can do. It's complicated, but I can get through it shortly. I can do home visits, but if I wanted to be established as an in-home care provider, that was the entirety of my practice, or even the bulk of my practice, I would need to undergo additional training to gain competency in that area. And for that model, you would look at education, training, and supervision until I established competency. And we could use a competency model here if we wanted to, but it wouldn't be a standard thing that I would consider doing right now. And so I don't think that's true for most mental health professions that aren't trying to do in-home services, because there's a whole another level of insurance that comes once I go into somebody else's home. And so we get into the the evils of the insurance companies, or I shouldn't say the evils, but the complications of someone who wants to cover me in case I put myself in a bad situation. So there are steps that need to be taken to be an in-home provider, and I think that we should look at those steps and mirror them. The other thing is, I wouldn't necessarily be going into somebody's home and staying there for 6 hours. That's a fundamental difference. It's a long period of time versus if I were going, the longest home visit I think I've ever done was 1.5 hours, and I should have only kept it to 1 hour. So some slight differences, but I think a good point to be short.
Super helpful. Thank you very much. Skippy, sorry. Sure.
Before we go on to Skippy, I just wanted to briefly add to this conversation that, a significant part of some of the equity reasoning is also looking at how people are currently practicing and not not a lack of guardrail, Dr. Connor, but to start the conversation about how can we create a regulated space that continues to look like spaces within Indigenous communities and the roles of being able to create as much continuity of care. So I do acknowledge that it's distinct from licensed mental health ways of perhaps doing home visits, but also a significant part of how the work has been done in the past, and also significant considerations for cost.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Can I just follow up real quick to that point? Is that if you don't mind, Chair Lundy? Just
now we're gonna go.
And I'll mute, and I won't unmute ever again. But it's to say that I think that both of the subcommittees that have both the safety subcommittee and then also the product subcommittee, the things we keep in mind of this idea of we don't want to create so many recommendations for regulations that we keep people out of the regulated space, right? That this idea that this is too cumbersome, so I'm going to stay in the gray or black market. We don't want to do that. We also want to make sure that everything we do is taking into consideration the costs of the recommendations that we're going to make and trying to keep those costs as low as possible. And then on top of that, for safety subcommittees to make sure we're keeping people safe, and for product committees to make sure that we're keeping the product safe. And so I just wanted to keep in mind all the lenses that we're using as we're trying to make these recommendations.
Completely. I appreciate you bringing up that balance. And I think one final point is also the importance of the autonomy of the facilitator. That was a big part of our conversation as well, and how to balance the whole market through models of that kind that keep in mind safety, keep in mind cultural dynamics, everything that you are saying. Thank you so much. All right, Skippy and Billy, I'll hand it back to you to manage the hands.
Awesome. I would have waited another half hour. That exchange was awesome. Dr. John, your precision and clarity around data use, which is one of my bullets, far better than I could have given. So I just really appreciate that. And I'll you jumping in with that second perspective. I just love watching how this pause work. So this is great. I just have two bullets here. One is really a second to what Dr. Connor was talking about, which is I too agree that we have probably the best opportunity to have a population-wide observational pulse modality study that's the yield observational work for everyone, like we've never seen in a psychedelic world, but it would take funding. So as far as that 10% max, I'll just think they need to look at having data and research as part of that space. That's one. And then two, you mentioned this, is the zoning piece. I think we do need to have a recommendation around zoning. I think this will take further discussion to hear exactly what it looks like, but it would sound something like healing centers or home healing, accredited facilities should be treated as medical clinics, health clinics, or service uses in all zone districts or all communities. And the reason that you want to have something like that is if it is left ambiguous in the law, then every single community individually, in the best case scenario, is going to have to bring it up and schedule multiple public hearings, bring in the same experts who are going to be thought over by the hundreds of different municipalities and counties, and ultimately have a very robust discussion about creating, in many cases, new zoning from whole cloth. In the best case scenario, that's realistically like a 6 to 8 month process. In most cases, that may take years, and in many cases, even never listen. And so just having a simple recommendation in writing makes it extremely easy for any planning staff to go, oh, this is that. We already have all the rules written. There you go. And you can start on day one. So I think it's like that.
Thanks very much, Skippy. Really appreciate Mr. Galvez. Dr. Sicily.
Yeah, and I agree, Skippy. That's so helpful. I want to just comment on the point number 2 regarding the Medicaid billing. I am just admittedly nervous about this, as much as I admire the motivation behind it. I just want to make sure that people have seen. There was an article I read the other day, an editorial in JAMA that was authored by an attorney, Mason Marks, who brought up a lot of crucial issues. I'm trying to remember the language he used was that, billing Medicaid, in this way, what we're suggesting may put us in violation of Federal False Claims Act and constitute healthcare fraud. And so I just want to make sure that, as like I said, as much as I admire the spirit of why this is being recommended, I worry that we need a lot more analysis on this before this is formalized in no recommendation, because I'm afraid it just puts us in this legal jeopardy. And I'm hoping that article, I sent it to Lori and Sam to make sure the board had access to the article. So please do take a look at that editorial. It's pretty hard to get published in JAMA, and the fact that it's in there suggest it's worth a read.
Thank you, Dr. Sicily, and appreciate that perspective. I guess I just, in my response, is that the intent of this recommendation is to simply ask the state to implement what is already in the underlying state law. And we recognize, as always, that there's a lot of work that we're doing and activity that's going on under this program that is illegal under federal law. I'm curious about, the Medicaid false claims, hypothesis, and try to take a look at that. But I know a lot about Medicaid coverage and don't see that this state provision violates federal Medicaid law. But that's an interesting perspective that I should learn more about.
Hey, Billy.
Very interesting. Yeah.
To that point, real quick, question that I had was, as that process may be happening and may take a little while, from your perspective, having worked so much within the Medicaid space, what do you think about the idea of making a recommendation that allows for Medicaid clients to receive cash pay services until there is somehow a decision of coverage that can be made? Because I know one dynamic that's significant for mental health providers or anybody licensed that could bill Medicaid is they cannot provide any services to Medicaid patients at a cost. They have to go through Medicaid coverage, but if Medicaid coverage hasn't been figured out, what can we do in the in-between? Do you have anything briefly to say on that?
So thank you very much for that. And so I think I played to say about it. Let me just say again, I just want to reiterate, because I think it is nuanced and it gets lost a lot. I don't think that you lost it, but I just want to reiterate for everyone listening. We're not talking about paying for a natural medicine product or natural medicine services. And we're not talking about Medicaid covering that. I personally would love that, but that is another big discussion for another day. We're talking about services that are already authorized and legal under Medicaid, already federally reimbursed to the state for its share of the state's expenses on these permitted therapy services. So I think that and so there's already mechanisms for billing. There's already mechanisms for figuring out if the provider who delivered the services is authorized to do so within the state, et cetera. All that's already there. We're just the way that I read this provision is that just because those otherwise covered services have to take place in a natural medicine context doesn't mean that the state can deny them. And I think, an analogous situation is if somebody were on THC and came in and had psychotherapy and the therapist delivered, Medicaid covered psychotherapy services, could the state deny payment, or would it be federal under Medicaid false claims law? I don't think so. I think that the state would pay it. It would be fully legal under federal law, just because there was a illegal activity that was going on, during the delivery of otherwise legal and covered Medicaid services. But I wonder if Ashley, if there's a burning, bona fide lawyer who wants to weigh in on this, I welcome it. But no pressure if you'd rather not, which I sympathize with. But anyway, Chair, that's at least my initial response to your point.
Good. Yeah, and to honor Ms. Miller's request, perhaps this is something that we could look at a future meeting. But I will give a moment if you have something to say, Ashley.
I actually think it's a really great question, and I think it's worth a little bit of. I want to dig into the article that I have not myself read, and I would like to kind of take a minute to consider Mr. Wynn's position and because I think that there are some good questions that are being posed. I'd like to bring it back for executive session, maybe at next full board meeting, so that we can have a more informed discussion about it.
Absolutely. Thank you. Billy, I'll hand it back to you to finish out with these questions. Billy?
Oh gosh, sorry. I was thanking you, Chair, and I was thanking you, Ms. Mueller, for that commentary and looking forward to digging into this issue more later. And then I was saying, Dr. Sisley, your hand is still up. Did you have something you wanted to say, or is that?
No, I'll get rid of it. Thanks.
Where's Dr. Goodwin?
Yeah, I would just like to bring back the idea of being able to do it in a facilitator's home. And I want to make one more argument for this because it's something I'm kind of passionate about. I know we have a long way. There's a lot of discussion to figure out how to do that the right way. But I want to make an argument for why we need to leave it on the table. And from a health equity perspective, Chair Lindy created this document. There was kind of some estimates of what it would cost a new facilitator to get in this market. And it was upwards of 50 grand with the way that we are currently laying it out. And a lot of that cost was actually from overhead. It wasn't licensing fees and some things, but the overhead itself, running a brick and mortar business, doing these things that could harm all these populations that we are trying to help. And so the argument is that allowing them to work from home, reduces some of the overhead costs. But we are talking right now a 1-to-4 ratio, right? So you can only facilitate up to 4 people at once. Hopefully we adjust that number to something where everyone's happier, but still it's a small number. And so if you only allow them to go to someone else's house, they can only do one at a time. And these are 10, 12-hour blocks of time that they're doing one at a time. And how can anyone run a business that way? Versus if you allow them to bring them into their own home, they could bring 4 or 6 people and facilitate at one time. And you just, from a business perspective, can run a more efficient business. And so I agree, we have some talking to do, we've got some work to do on how to do that properly. But I just think we need to leave that on the table. And that's why, and that's kind of where we're coming from. So one more plug for the residential on my part. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Good. Appreciate that. Dr. Chavez. I'm sorry to say you're still could be muted. We're not hearing you.
No.
Yes.
Oh.
Yes.
My system changes between 3 different choices. And anyway, what I wanted to share was it relates to what Dr. Goodwin was saying and what Dr. Connor was saying. I'm just going to give you a picture of what group sessions look like in the United States, not using the sacred mushroom, but perhaps a healing session with the mescal or some other healing modality. First of all, a group will arrive anywhere from maybe 5 to 10 individuals will arrive in at your home. And usually the facilitator's home and yard has been modified with sacred spaces and spaces to provide modalities. For example, it's my backyard. And people arrive, and if I have a group of maybe 10 people, and they're going to be spending the night and we're going to be doing ceremonies, sometimes I choose to rent an outhouse, but a lot of times if I don't do that, these individuals are coming into my home and using my bathroom, using my restroom. But the majority of our healing session or healing work is done in my backyard. And then they spend the night and there's intense healing, whether it's with a sweat lodge or whatever the modality might be. But then the next day, we sleep, I watch over them, helpers watch over people as they sleep. And then the next day we have breakfast, a feast, and we close the sacred circle. So, and this could be an individual that has a license that wants to do the work at home. And so just these considerations for groups, people of color that have been doing these types of sessions around sweat lodges and healing groups in their backyards for as long as I can remember. But that's what it looks like. And I'm sure that different healers and different curanderos and curanderas run their circles differently. Everybody's very individual. But I just wanted you to picture what that looks like for a lot of groups that already exist and provide healing work in their homes. Thank you.
Fiddly, you're unmuted.
Go again. Sorry. Yes, just say thank you very much, Dr. Chavez, for those comments. I definitely appreciate it. Skippy.
Yeah, just to briefly piggyback on this, I do think having an option for home-based care is important. I mean, within eyeshot of me, and I know I'm in an extreme situation, but to find a 500 square foot commercial space with a bathroom, you're looking at $10,000 to $20,000 a month. So you can imagine what that translates to in terms of delivery, and that's in a community with 400% the national suicide rate. And the people that are in that camp tend to be the people who can't spend $5,000 for a service and need something tomorrow. So I just super important for many places, but it's really especially so in my immediate environment. And so just a couple comments as this is considered. You talked about the service provider going to the residents versus having it at their residence. I don't know which is the right answer, if it's both or one or the other. I could see benefit to either. Certainly, a masseuse, if you don't want a $400 massage, goes to your house. There's a precedent for that. It's convenient. But having it at the facilitator's house, as we talked about, set and setting is super important. And so the opportunity to have more control over the set and setting, to make it safer, to make it more calming, etc., is a benefit that you can't have when you go to someone else's house. And then the comments were made about, sort of commercializing a residential place. That's a great consideration. It's also a consideration that almost every community has already made for itself. There will be lots of places, even if we allow this in these regulations, where the HOA strictly prohibits it, where the community in its own district has banned any kind of commercial use or specific commercial use. And so I don't think that that's necessarily a consideration that we need to take on. It's going to be different everywhere. And I think we can trust the local zoning authority and land use regulation to pick that stuff up and make its own decisions for itself.
Thank you very much. Yeah, great point taken. Jack.
I'll start by apologizing to Chair Lundy because I promised to never come off with mute again, and obviously I've broken that promise. First, to point of clarification, there is not currently a discussion around not permitting the facilitator to facilitate in their own home. There's not a regulation suggesting that. We're still entertaining definitions about that and what it might look like. It's simply to say that an individual should not be facilitating in their own home as in the same fashion as if they were traveling to a participant's home to facilitate in that home. And I think that the points that Dr. Chavez made will, in fact, highlight why we would not want that to happen. And even some of the points that Skippy made and some of the points that Billy made is to say, it's one thing to go to a person's house. So one of the things we're envisioning when we think about in-home care is the idea that it's unlikely that in the hospice care facilities where people might be spending some time towards the end of life, if they're receiving federal funding, they're not going to allow natural medicine to come onto their property. They're not going to allow people to facilitate natural medicine on that property. So a lot of the work that we've done in thinking about facilitating in the home has been at the time of dying or in the hospice process as a starting point. Not to say that's the only way we would do it, but here you're talking about a much different relationship than the ceremonial relationships that you all have been alluding to, which are equally important and look a lot different. I think the idea here is to say, even when Dr. Chavez was giving what I thought was a very illuminating and very informative description of what the facilitation of a ceremony at a facilitator's home might look like, Dr. Chavez, you alluded to having assistants there with you and sometimes getting a portable toilet to be put outside, depending on the considerations, right? And so the idea is to say, if someone wants to do that kind of ceremonial process, in my mind, regardless of what we recommend, I would think that DOR is going to regulate that, and DORA might also regulate that. And so our goal will be to make recommendations to help DOR and DORA figure out how they want to regulate it, and whether that regulation looks different than what it might look like for an individual who's going to other people's homes. So just as a point of clarification, at this point, the safety committee subcommittee is not entertaining the idea of not allowing facilitators to use their own home. What we're stipulating is that they probably need to go through some regulatory steps in order to be able to facilitate in their own home. What we need to figure out is what are those regulatory steps. So hopefully that allays some of the concerns in that I don't think there's on the table now to make a recommendation to not allow facilitators to facilitate in their own home, but instead to figure out how we make sure it's safe, equitable, fair, and for everybody involved, I think is where we're at.
Thank you very much. I'll take them. I appreciate that clarification where the subcommittee is at.
I don't see any other hands up,
So I'm going to hand it back to you, Charlotte.
Thanks so much, Billy. I'm going to go ahead and do just a time check for everyone. We have about an hour and a half left in our scheduled time. I am aware it is Friday afternoon for all of us. So I'm going to go ahead and request that we take one more break for 5 minutes. And then we come back and do our best to create space to hear from subcommittees, but also acknowledge the time of where we're at. So it is 3:29 right now, and we will come back at 3:34. Please be sure to make sure your cameras are turned off and that you are muted, and I will start the meeting again at 3:34.
Good.
This is Chair Lundy. It is 3:34. Welcome back from break. Hope you were able to take some deep breaths, get refreshed, and we're gonna finish out this meeting strong together. We have 4 more significant components. We're gonna hear from Indigenous and Religious next. The final 2 subcommittees have not yet met this month. Products as well as licensing. So I know we've already heard Dr. Connor from you, some thoughts about products. But I just want to offer that we will hear perhaps some thoughts from those chairs, but those 2 subcommittees have not yet met. And then we will go into executive session. So I am going to head to our next subcommittee update, which is from Indigenous and Religious Use and Outreach. And Dr. Pincola Estes, I will pass the chance for you to share an update with us.
Hola. Thank you. Thank you, Chairperson Lundy. Appreciate it. I wanted to just point out that there are 13 helpers who are on this call who help us almost every day, whether we are present to what they do or not. They are Miss Bratton, Councillor Mullen, Miss Weirs, Miss Mendiola, Miss Roviena, Mr. Barami, Miss Arcivit, Miss Duran, Councillor Uranka, Miss Warner, Carter, Sutherland, and Lukes. That's almost one-on-one. There are 13 helpers, healers, putters togethers, couplers, people walking with us, almost one-to-one. There's only 15 people on our board, and there's 13 people who are hand in hand with us. I just want to acknowledge and thank, because it is flooding into me, plus my studies, plus all the people who are online who are discussing all these matters that I just sort of listen in on and peek into every now and then. It is so vast a territory. This is almost 30 people who are working together with each other in a consistent, relentless, and I think beautiful way. So kudos to all of you. Thank you so much. Secondly, just a remark about women left out of research with regard to the idea of following people with detailing data from who does what in sessions and so forth. Most women, but men too, have been the recipients of not the best medicine in the world for decades and decades. Women are often left out of studies as a result of, I think, probably not even registering that they exist. And therefore, their unique hormonal systems, their unique brain chemistry, their unique backgrounds, their unique genetic DNA has not been not been cared for. And there are many studies that were done in the 30s, 40s, 50s, in the 1920s, but also forward that have misused men in studies, not telling them what actually was being studied, giving them placebos that they knew were not going to intervene and heal them and help them, such as the gonorrhea and syphilis studies that were done in prisons with men, for instance. Its own holocaust in the medical field of research. So I'm hoping very, very much so that people will understand that there's lots and lots of different variations, even amongst all the people who are supposedly divided into several genders. The gender probably isn't even the right word. I'm not quite sure what the right word is right now, but that all people will be included. So that's my 2 cents. In my particular genetic group of Native Americans, but also a lot of Native Americans carry Jewish blood because of the fleeing of Jews from Spain into Mexico and the southwestern United States, and intermarriage, other matters in which babies were born. So you might say conditions of delicacy where certain things are not shown, such as in the pancreas and diabetes, for instance. And all these things we hope will be taken into account. So just to say that. Mason Marks, who wrote the article that Dr. Sicily is talking about, I read it also. Mason is a lawyer. He's out of Florida, I believe. He's domiciled there. He is also, I believe, either an adjunct and or a graduate of Harvard, and it's well worth reading. Well worth reading. He's a very thoughtful person. He's very clear-cut. And so I hope that you avail yourself to that. In our group, and I want to acknowledge Miss Bratton. Miss Bratton, you take meticulous notes. I am so grateful to you for the notes that you took at our last meeting that you then shared with us, and we are ever grateful for that, because what we're trying to do in our subcommittee at this moment is we are in the stage of no longer budding on the trees, the limbs, at the beginning of growing season, they have little dots on them, on the bracts. Those little dots are buds with warmth and with water, with rain, with lengthening light during the days. Those little dots turn into actual buds, and the buds are hard, usually. Inside the bud, and we're past the budding stage. That was back in January, February of this year. Inside each bud, suddenly one day, they get larger and they snap open like valises, and they release a fruit. And we're in the flowering part now. We have not gotten to the fruit. The fruit always comes last, but we're in the flowering part. Not every bud comes to flower. So we've had many, 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 many buds open, and I think a majority of them have remained open. In other words, ideas under consideration, thoughtfulness, directives, patterns that have been released. The subcommittee has made Dr. Chavez, Ricardo Vaca, Skippy Mesero Upton, Dr. Gonzalez, and myself. And I think that every single person has made tremendous, insightful contribution. So this is what we are talking about now. In flower, not yet in fruit, meaning this is not final. It's been history. We did a review of the accelerated training program applicants agenda. And this is what was suggested not only by our board members, subcommittee members, but also by people who are called participating non-voting, or non-voting participants. And they would like to see, in aggregate, a showing that an apprenticeship has been a minimum of 3 to 5 years and acts yet to be determined, sorry, was not my first line, be determined, to be determined, were vowels. So this criteria for facilitator license in the subcategory that we're talking about, indigenous, religious, and outreach, spiritual, etc. use. Number 2, provide an outline of how the facilitator's ceremonies are conducted. This is to adjudicate the people who are saying, I want to do this, and I want to show I've been doing this for a long time. And so that's why people are saying, show that you have an apprenticeship with a person who will vouch for you, or persons who will vouch for you, that has been a minimum of 3 to 5 years with X number of hours. Provide an outline. The outline is, I understood it when we're speaking, could be a paragraph, it could be longer than that, of how the facilitator's ceremonies are conducted. So we'll have an idea of what the protocol is that's being used for safety, which is, of course, under DORA, the primary consideration is public safety. Number 3, provide an outline of what occurs in preparation for the ceremony of the plant, of the matter, substance matter that's being used, the ceremony itself, and an outline of what happens in the integration part, and also and also after the fact, what's followable. So, number 4, documentation of teachers, students. We are hoping will be under someone who has the creds. It says here in the notes credential, but that's not quite the spirit of what we talked about. A lot of people, Elena Avila, who was one of my maestras, was a registered nurse and curandera. I am a psychoanalyst, a post-trauma recovery specialist, with a postdoctoral diploma of 6 years as a psychoanalyst. I've been practicing for 53 years. So the credibility or the creds of the teachers are often in 2 worlds. Dr. Chavez has degrees in 2 worlds also, and of course creds in the world of curanderismo. And so this documentation of teachers, someone who has the creds, mentorship was suggested that be shown, and the set aside is it would be good if it were an elder, meaning a person who has long years of experience, maybe the tribal council, if this is a adjudicated tribe, meaning federally recognized. There's 574 recognized tribes in the states. There are also quite a few tribes that are recognized only by the state that the tribe lives in. And then there are many, many people who are urban native people who are not affiliated with tribes, or might be as well. But then there are also people who are biracial, who are definitely Native American, and usually Spanish, Greek, or Italian, because those are the main nationalities of the conquistadores who came to this part of the world in the early 1500s. So it says that the teacher should have credential qualification of some sort. And credential, again, credibility is, I think, closer to what we were talking about. But they could have a credential. It'd be great if they did. It'd be great if they walk into roles. Why not? The more the better. Qualification, meaning their age, their demographic, and so forth. These are not spelled out specifically yet because, like I said, we're in the flowering stage. These are ideas that most everyone, all the way from usefully all the way to vehemently agreed with in our last meeting. So, also, in order to qualify for this facilitator license that is like whatever called by a board, by references, by life lived, which incidentally, there's a very long history of doing equivalencies in order to get a degree or to get a license. Psychology license in Colorado still does equivalencies. If you happen to have gone to a school that is accredited, but you took a course of study that's highly unusual, you can do equivalencies to whatever is required by the state for licensure of psychologists. Also, what used to be called the University Without Walls, which is started now about, gosh, I'd say 45 years ago by the Coalition and Consortium of Experimental Colleges and Universities that is now fully accredited by NCAA. They too give credit for life work, a great deal of that. So that we are not in left field creating out of whole cloth or smoke. These actually come venerable and recognized rootstock basis. So providing evidence of completion of a state training and exam might be a part of all of this. References, at least one of the references must have been the person's teacher. And we talked about how community has a say-so about who is safe and who is reliable. Some people thought the word respectable would be a useful way of looking at this. Respect being incidentally, yet traditional medicine, respect means to be able to see, S-E-E, to be able to not only see in this work what goes on with people, what stands with them, what stands behind them, what stands underneath them, what their value system is, but also to see in the other, the second, the world of spirit. So then the suggestions went from there to perhaps to write an essay of their healing experience, i.e. their journey, and then interviews with them, like it'd be a person-on-person interview to see how this person is put together, and then a live demonstration test. Now, we're not saying all of these things need to be, because this is way, way, way heavy burden in showing what you have. But because many people are not going to have a Western overcultural set of credentials, these are the thoughts that people are having present in our subcommittee. Now, we talked about, I have people I've worked with and people I've trained with who cannot read or write, but can't do it in their native language, So we want to have a set aside for mentors, guides, teachers, maestros, maestras, who have trained people, but they will need to be spoken to face-to-face or verbally online or on a telephone call, so they could verify without embarrassing them, that there's only one way to go with this, because there's many paths. So that's that part. The next thing that we did was we did a review of generational license pathways, meaning that many people, whether they are recognized federal tribes or whether they are indigenous or curanderismo, santeria, or other healing ways, they don't have the credentials that have been set up to a T by Western culture. Though those are admired, and there is absolutely definite advantage of having those, their path is generation. Their grandmother, their great-grandfather, their father, their mother, their aunts, their tios, their community in the village they grew up in have been their teachers from the time they were little bitty children. And so my grandson, Chico, my nieto, he has a teacher who is Lakota. It's so simple. The Lakota is his grandfather. His grandfather says to him one day, when you drink your coffee, when you make it in the morning, you pray over those coffee grounds before you put the water into them. And then he says, once you make the coffee, you spill a little bit about the scoffing, bit of thanks of all the people who grew the coffee, who grew the, and who harvested it, and who packed it, and who trucked it, and who drove it to market, so that you could find it, so that you could buy it. It's that simple. It's daily, and it is not a generational hand-me-down, let me put it that way. It's not done by going to school. It's not done by taking classes, although there's great benefit taking classes, it's huge benefit. It is on a moment-to-moment basis. What people often think that I'm a storyteller, that we must have all sat around telling stories. No, that's not happen. We told stories during work. Oh, let's unload the lumber from the truck so we can build the staves for the tomatoes. Okay. Hey, did you hear about the man who had hands made of wood? Let me tell you that story when we do this hard work. That's how you learn what the material is. So that's how you learn how to help it to heal. So we did a review of generational pathway. We thought that the license type, even though those two words they're not anathema, they're unfamiliar to many people to think of license, think of type. But for these purposes, that's the phraseology that we're using. May fit under the wellness license section 5, and the applicant may be able to bypass testing if they meet the accelerated criteria. Accelerated in this case means the ability to show that you have done the work, that you have walked the walk, that you are not just a talker who's talking the talk, that you picked up something on a weekend class, or you went to an institute and you spent a day or a weekend learning something, and came back and thought that you were done. You're not done. You're never done. In our traditions, you're never done. Always learn, and they always have teachers. And so the last thing that we did was a review of the generational license criteria for approval. We see that the legislature would be required to set up a council to oversee all of this that we're talking about now in the flowering stage. And we would want to promote collaboration between state and local leaders, meaning a liaison for the tribes. Now, let me say this. In my personal 2 cents worth, we are not doing yet a good job with liaisoning with the nationally recognized tribes. Understanding the history of where we live, we were here in the Southwest, and this used to be northern Mexico, as brutalized by the invading people, brutalized, enslaved. Slavery did come from, I'm a historian. My PhD is in ethnoclinical psychology with the emphasis in indigenous history. We didn't suddenly decide to embrace all the things that have come down. Slavery appears to have come actually from the invaders who enslaved the Mexican tribal people, of which there were thousands of tribes, imported into eventually the U.S. because of the invasion and takeover of northern Mexico that then became Texas, Nuevo Mexico, New Mexico, Arizona, Nevada, Utah, Colorado, California, and so on and so forth. So remembering that is the history of Native people in this part of the world. The idea that we now want your cooperation, your help, your thoughts, your ideas. We want to help you. We want to protect you. We want to, and don't mean this about anybody who's alive now, but the historical reality between the Carlisle schools, which are brutal if you look at the before and after pictures of all the little Native children stripped from their cultures. The brutality of the Franciscans, who dominated the Southwest, not only enslaved, but destroyed the temples and the places of worship, and took over the lakes of the sacred places, and claimed the land where there were sacred burials. All you have to do is look at Sam Creek, which unleashed a group of men who had been fighting in the Civil War, were war hard, and did the most, I can't even tell you the letters that were written by some of the men who refused to participate, what they actually said. It's worse than obscene. So when you take all, and you have to remember that people have long memories and they're storytellers. They tell each other the stories of what went down. They still have what I would call memory. And so we really need a delegation of people to go with food. We need people to go with gifts. We need people to do really what is understood. So far, that has not happened. We have meetings. Meetings is not exactly the way to go forward. So I'm hoping we can improve on that. I know we can. I know we can. And I would like to take all of our subcommittee together with us to some of the groups. I've been up to Wind River, which is northern Cheyenne, Shoshone, just 3 or 4 weeks ago. I've been down to the Ute Reservation, talked to Ben Nighthorse Campbell and other people who are of that particular tribe. And there is a way through here. We need to put more time to it and effort to it. And we need a little bit of funding to do that. A little bit of money to do that. Okay. So let me just say that part for that part. And then let me end with this partners. 2 items. One is, we have not yet spoken about, but we will, about how we can make an advisory. We can't change it because it's a legislative act that needs to come from the legislature. But we want to see if we could do something about the idea that only Native people, registered Native people, by the federal government, are left out of being compensated financially for doing healing work or having a healing center. There are many layers to that needs to be looked at. It is, in my opinion, and I don't use this word lightly, it is an exclusion based on race and religion. Not cool. Not done. Muy malo. Oh boy. Okay, so there's that. Second thing is, want to talk about with my subcommittee about equity and inclusion and price, because we have a time-honored way of doing that. It is by what people in the overculture would call volunteerism. In other words, we do many, many, many things that we charge nothing for. Friendship is the cost, you might say. Love, truly, love is the cost. Respect, respeto, amor, unitas, the unity, meaning struggling day to day with all of our community, not just dropping by for, the good part or the good part. So we'll talk more about that. Low cost availability can come through a significant volunteer cohort that can be developed, not only amongst our people, but amongst people who follow a different path altogether, licensed. There is, before hospice was called hospice, it was a hospice for big hospitals. And we volunteered all of our time. Do we have time to do that? Well, probably not. We were raising children, we were going to school, we were working full time. But yes, we could. We could figure it out. And we could take our children with us. And we would teach our children to do palliative care while we were doing what we were doing. We were essentially, as you know, creating the universe as we went along, about whatever was needed rather than what was required. So I'm just closed with this. The subcommittee is making great progress. The people who have reached out to tribal groups and Colorado have done a good job. and we need a bit more. The people who have been our non-voting participants, who are often registered tribal people or lawyers who are working for registered tribal groups, have been excellent. They've been thoughtful, they've been kind, they've been loving, but also they are alert to not wanting to get trampled on again, run over again. Remember, the Blue Lake was just returned to Taos Pueblo not too many years ago after having been taken over by the government, their sacred lake high above their pueblo. It took decades for them to receive that back. Bears Ears just came into being, and then all of a sudden, federal government decided to reduce its landmass. It was decided upon by 5 tribal groups, including the Utes from Colorado, that no, you have too much. No, so, I'm just saying too, it is an ongoing, las luchas, ongoing struggles with agriculture. So I think there's great hope. I believe that the goodwill and the great hearts of people will prevail, and also that we can put together a volunteer nation that can make sure that people have plant medicine. There's all kinds of resources. There's endowments, private, public, and federal, and state, and local. There's grants, there's gifts from philanthropists. There's programs. If you look at the criteria or the outcomes of National Jewish Hospital or Doctors Without Borders or other endeavors like the Shriners, God bless them. Their motorcycle brigade and all the parades and their good-heartedness. We have models for all of this, and we can do this. And we don't want to get so bound up by rules and regulations that people aren't free to help who is right within their reach, right before them. In Mexico, which is my home country, so my citizenship is Mexican and United Statesian, as is my grandson's. And so the travel back and forth is very easy. People set up their healing bed right on the porch, in the portico, in the portale of their little teeny house that might be a tin shed made of corrugated iron. They open their little tiny healing restaurant with all the remedios right on the front porch, right there. They do their healing, helping, chanting, dancing, giving them substance right there. And the little kids come by and watch and learn, and the adults and elders nod and say, "Oh, that was good." And so over-regulation, I'm not saying it's anathema, but it can really impinge on not only the safety and knowledge, law of knowledge, but also accessibility and keeping costs low. So I have a friend who's an organic farmer who's out on the plains. The regulations for what constitutes an organic cucumber or zucchini has gotten way out of hand. We go out there in August every year to gather pollen for our ceremonies from his corn. Once the wasps and bees and birds and everybody has cross-pollinated the crops and the tassels are pretty high over our heads, we go out, we take what pollen is left. We're grateful that the farmer lets us do that. But if that cucumber is more than a certain curve, it's rejected. If that zucchini has a twist to it, it's no longer considered organic. And it's perfectly fine. So that's the model that I'd like to keep in mind, is that the food is good, the substance is great, the healing is there. If it's a little bit unusual to take, the nutrition is still fully present. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Estes, both for your eldership of this whole board as well as your guidance and perspectives. Really appreciate having such a robust lens to see into your subcommittee's work. I also want to acknowledge several of us who weren't formally part of the subcommittee got to attend this month. And I just highly encourage any board members who are not part of the Indigenous and Religious and Outreach Subcommittee to consider joining and learning from the diverse and robust amount of wisdom, especially if your primary mode of learning has been within clinical, Western, and over culture settings. So thank you so much. Are there any comments or questions for Dr. Estes?
Andy, thank you for that. And everyone is always welcome at our sub. Dr. Cicely is on there. There are others too who would drop by, which is very much appreciated because Dr. Hanum has often, I have spoken to Dr. Hanum about collaboration, and her heart is wide open to that, about how we might certify one another from two different pathways that at the heart of them, like a Venn diagram, the heart is right in the middle overlapping. And it is common to all of us. There's not a one of us who is on some other weird page that doesn't belong. Everyone belongs. So thank you for making the offer, Lundy, and I second that very much.
Thank you so much. I don't see any hands, so I'm going to just take one more second. Otherwise, Dr. Estes, thank you so much for a thorough update on your subcommittee. Really appreciate it.
I appreciate it. I'm turning it to my 79th year in 3 weeks. And I hope you're impressed because I am.
I'm so impressed. That's amazing. That's amazing. And near the solstice.
So, but thank you again. I appreciate all of you, every single one of you. I was thinking tonight when I was listening again to Billy Wynn, I remember what he said when he was adjudicated before the state senate. He said, I went to the others committee and it listed several things, but the thing that stayed with my heart was she said, I don't want to see people dying. That great heart, I believe, is at the center of what we're here for, is make this as safe, as beautiful, as accessible, as reasonable, as helpful, as very possible, with no harm to anyone, facilitators, people, patients, anyone. Have everything be good. So thank you again for listening.
Absolutely. Shared. I have a deep amount of respect for how much care is on this board, across the board from all of our expertise and perspectives. Thank you so much. Okay. And everyone, I am just someone who is thoughtful to time. So I want to acknowledge that our last 2 subcommittee updates are from subcommittees that have not yet met this month. But Dr. Connor, I do want to give you a brief moment if there's anything that you would like to put on the board's radar from products, research, and data. You have the floor to do so.
Yeah, as noted, we haven't met. I just wanted to note that we will take the recommendations that were made by the Equity Subcommittee to the next meeting, which is on Wednesday of next week. And we've also, just to give you an update, that committee has really shifted its focus now towards the data side of things. And so with that, I'll yield.
Wonderful. Does anyone have any questions specific to Dr. Connor? I also know that he made some comments on products in earlier subcommittee conversations. So briefly want to open the floor and see if anybody has any considerations or questions for Dr. Connor. Seeing none, thank you, Dr. Connor. I want to make the same invitation to Subcommittee Chair Dr. Hannum, who oversees qualifications, licensing, and training. Dr. Hannum, what would you like for us to know in light of the fact that you all haven't met? Or I'm part of that subcommittee. We haven't met yet this month.
I don't have any real updates. I very much appreciate the work Dr. Estes' subcommittee has done, and I'm looking forward to discussing that at our next meeting of qualifications, licensing, and training. And yeah, looking forward to the meeting next week. I really don't have anything else to add other than I would be really open to seeing any other red lines too from Skippy or anyone else on the board that could send those to us preferably before the next meeting, just so we could get to those. I do have a request, Chair Lundy. Would it be possible to do my attestation? My son is about to play goalie in a youth hockey game, so I can't be late. It's right at 5.
You bet. And good luck. That sounds like a lot of fun.
Thank you. Yeah, a lot of pressure.
I bet. Cheering you on from the ether. Dr. Hannum, do you attest and affirm that all conflicts of interest have been disclosed?
I do. Thank you again, Chair Lundy, and for all your leadership. Thanks.
You bet. Thank you so much. I want folks to know that we will do our best to stay in step with time. And also it's important that we cover board business. But Ms. Mueller, I didn't see you go off mute. Is there something that you wanted to briefly say?
No, apologies. I did not intend to if I did. Sorry about that.
No worries. I may have missed that. Skippy, I see that your hand is raised.
Yes. So I did already submit red lines. I realize I'll be in this meeting, so I'm sharing these things that I noted just for the rest of the board in case it like stirs anything for them. But the things that I noticed in going through this are the following. First, for our first batch of our first class of facilitators, like who are the chickens to those eggs? Who are the supervisors is a question that I'm not yet clear on during the training period. Number 2, we talk a lot about continuing education requirements in terms of hours. There are other points that say things like you must be up to date on research. And so I just wonder about how those are tied together. Is continuing education going to be particular types of continuing education? Is it split up in a certain way? I think that needs some additional fleshing out. 3, I am not sure that I think it's 5 hours of self-care for, sorry, someone just walked into the party. Ray, I'm on a natural medicine board called, that's yours if you want it. So I'm not sure. Yes, Harold. Yes. So I'm not sure if the 5 hours in the training specified for self-care of the facilitator meets what I read from the non-voting members, what they submitted. I think that was quite a bit more robust, so I think we should talk about that further. And then the last 2 things, now that we have additional kind of build out from the Indigenous and Religious Subcommittee on what the accelerated path looks like, we just got to kind of think about how to make that in continuity, because the stuff that's in the recommendations currently doesn't yet align with that, as it wouldn't, because it's new information. And then the last thing is, I think we need a definition for what I'm thinking of as rural and remote service providers. There's some talk about, if you don't have access to a training center, you can do X, Y, and Z. But how do we define that? Is it miles? Is it distance? I think we need some kind of standard so that we can understand what that is for people.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Skippy. And just to make the additional invitation to all board members, we're really looking at any gaps that one committee is aware of and another one could be informed by. So similar to Skippy's ideas and redlining, I invite all of us to submit any ideas we want subcommittees to consider to Sam and Lori. I know that one consideration I have for this subcommittee as well is how do we navigate if a facilitator or someone seeking licensure as a facilitator, but their background is from Indigenous spaces and their elder or teacher is either in a remote area or has passed. How can we validate their learning and education and acknowledgement of different dynamics at play when it comes to supervision and oversight? Are there any final considerations? Yes, Dr. Estes.
Just wanted to say, in our communities throughout the Southwest, we actually know the names of the people we don't walk the top. We know the names of the start. But no, I'm pretty sure we know them, not all, but most. So if they are to crop up with their references often all deceased, for instance, was one of the typical ways that's used. Yes, I studied with these people, but they're all dead. I think that we can have something to add to how you ask the questions that will reveal hopefully the sincerity of each applicant. And if that is not present, then that would be up to the committee to decide how to deal with that. But I think that we can certainly talk about our experiences of having not only confronted, but also been clipped by people who gather up followers and then drop them. I think that's important. Please pick up the piece. Yes, that's all. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Estes. I saw your hand up again, Dr. Estes. Did you have a final thought? Oh, it went down. Okay.
That's it's a fun thing. We call it, duendes. In Spanish, duendes means goblins. It's a duende. That happened with
The virtual goblins. We all navigate them. Okay, thank you so much. Well, seeing that we've heard from all subcommittees, I want to open up the floor just once more. Are there any final considerations that any board members have for subcommittee chairs or those who presented on the chair's behalf? Seeing none, we're going to move on to our next agenda item, which is the executive session. Ms. Bratton, can you confirm that the recorder is on?
It is on.
Okay, great. Can you confirm, Ms. Mueller, did I see? Nope. Okay, I keep going back. Can you confirm that we have 2/3 of the membership present?
1 second. Make sure no one's dropped off. We do.
Wonderful. This is Lundy, and the time is 4:19. This is a meeting of the Natural Medicine Advisory Board. Can I have a motion that the board enter into executive session for the purpose of discussing with counsel request to receive legal advice on specific legal questions pursuant to the Colorado Revised Statute Section 24-6-402 3A Roman numeral 2, including requests for the legal advice from certain subcommittees specifically related to agenda items number 5. From the Indigenous and Religious Use Subcommittee, what are the possible interpretations of the language in the exemption in CRS section 12-170-1084 for bona fide religious, culturally traditional, and spiritual purposes? And from the Products, Research, and Data Subcommittee, whether the Practice Act prohibits licensees from using natural medicines cultivated out of state.
So,
may I have?
Yeah, second. So,
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Seeing none, this was a unanimous vote with at least 2/3 of the membership present. And now I'm going to ask for all the board members to leave the open session webinar and enter the executive session meeting.
That link was sent to each board member to their board email.
Back into our email. Okay, thank you.
Lundy, could I possibly do my attestation before? I am planning to come back to close in this meeting, but my computer may die and my co-working space has turned into a holiday party, and I just don't want to miss that opportunity. Or is it too late?
I think it's too late with the fact that we just voted to enter executive session. So we'll have to get back.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. To attend these meetings to ensure quorum, and please give as much notice as possible if it's not possible for you to join a meeting. I will now move to close the meeting with attestations. Alex Y. Lundy, Attest and affirm that all conflicts of interest have been disclosed. Vice Chair Dr. Cotto.
I attest.
Dr. Tina Gonzalez. I attest. Dr. Clarissa Pincola Estes Reyes. I hear audio, but I didn't hear an attestation. Are you with us, Dr. Estes? Okay, I'm going to try again in just a moment, just because I didn't hear you, Dr. Estes. Commander Buxton Andrade has already attested. Dr. Sophia Chavez, I attest. Scorpia Upton Mazzaro. I will come back to Skippy. Ricardo Baca already attested. Sheriff David Porro already attested. Did I hear? Okay, Skippy, do you attest?
That's
Fantastic. Dr. Estes, are you with us now to attest?
I attest.
Awesome. Thank you so much. William Dunn is absent from today's meeting. Dr. Goodwin, do you attest?
I attest.
Thank you. Dr. Hannum already attested. Dr. Sicily, do you attest?
I attest.
Thank you. Billy Wynn.
I attest. Thank you.
Stacy Lokes.
I attest.
Dominique Mendiola.
Thank you, Brad.
Did we lose Dominique?
Sorry.
I'm here. I attest. Awesome. Thank you so much. Before we make a motion to adjourn, there's a few items to be addressed. I would like to sincerely thank everybody for 4 hours on their Friday afternoon and for participating on today's meeting. The next meeting will be held Friday, January 19th, 2024 at 1 p.m. And again, if you're unable to attend for any reason, please let Lori know as soon as possible, the program director. Now I would like to provide a brief moment for Dr. Estes to provide a closing word.
Thank you. Thank you, Lundy. Blessed return of the light to everyone. I would like to remind you of one of the great plant medicine stories of the world. You probably remember this story by Charles Dickens. It is completely about plant medicine. Scrooge is depressed, anxious every single day. What happens is he goes home on Christmas Eve after denying an extra log in the fireplace to his worker who works for him, a fine man who has a young family. And he's just, people say Merry Christmas to him, and he goes, bah humbug. And he goes home and makes his meager gruel, but something happens. And in the middle of the night, he's awakened by a spirit that appears to him. He has a vision. And he says, he admits that he's taken and ingested something. He says, you may be an undigested bit of beef, a plot of mustard. What is mustard? It's medicine. A crumb of cheese. What is cheese but fermented plant and dairy medicine? A fragment of an underdone potato, which is a nightshade family. And throughout the night, 2 more spirits appear to him, showing him his past, where he was in love, and he turned love away, on how sad that was, and how he became more and more upset and miserly. And then the next one, and the next one. And then finally it showed him what he really loved was children and the happiness of people. And by the time all 3 spirits had visited him from his plant medicine induction, he was redeemed. He was transformed. He went out into the streets and shouted that everyone will be happy, goodwill on earth, and peace to all. And that is the best story I know. May you be watched over. May you be blessed. May you be walked with, and may you be kept safe until we see you all again. Adios.
Thank you, Dr. Estes. May I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved, Dr. Goodwin. No. Second.
Thank you, Skippy. Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion passes. This meeting of the Colorado Natural Medicine Advisory Board has been adjourned 4 minutes early. Thank you, everybody who attended the meeting today.
Thank you guys all.
Happy holidays. Thank you, Dr. Estes.
Happy holidays.
Holiday.
That was